May we request everyone to please settle down so we can now resume our program. Thank you. Guys, una ka. Pa-picture na lang. Sige, pa-picture ako. Nakasmile. Pa-picture ako. Dito. Ito para candid. Kunwari candid. Sige. Sige. Thank you. Again, may we please request everyone to take your seats. All right. Okay, once again, good afternoon, speakers, distinguished guests from the government, the diplomatic community, the academe, and think tanks. Once again, I am Joyce Reyes. I am the Deputy Executive Director for I'm the Deputy Executive Director for Strategic Engagements of the Stratbase ADR Institute, and I'm your host for today. Welcome back to our conference on the 8th year of the Arbitral Victory, a collective pursuit of maritime security in the West Philippine Sea. So one of the most important parts of our celebration of the 8th anniversary of the Arbitral Award is the recognition of the valiant efforts of those in the front lines to assert our rights in the West Philippine Sea. They are our heroes from the Philippine military and the Philippine Coast Guard who risk their own lives to defend the Philippine waters. Many of them are actually here with us today, so may we request the brave men and women of the Philippine military and the Philippine Coast Guard to please stand up. And let us all give them a round of applause, please, for all their efforts. For all their efforts in defending and ensuring our national sovereignty. Maraming salamat po. Now, some of them, while not here, are watching us live via Facebook, including, there you go, the Navy operating bases from Zambales. So they are watching us all the way from the Philippine waters. So let's give them a round of applause as well, please. Thank you. All right. With our sovereignty under threat, the Philippine government has strategically shifted our focus from internal security to external security. The recent adoption of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept by the Philippine government marks a pivotal shift in our defense strategy. And we are very privileged today because those who are directly involved in the formulation and implementation of these strategies aimed at effectively safeguarding the Philippines' rights in the West Philippine Sea will be joining us today in this third panel. To begin this panel's discussion, we are honored to have with us today the Presidential Assistant for Maritime Concerns, General Andres Centino. He will talk about the strategic vision for maritime security, policy, and operational integration. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome General Centino.
Justice Antonio Carpio, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Professor Manhit, sir, fellow workers in government, Ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon at isang mapagpalang araw sa ating lahat. The Presidential Office for Maritime Concerns is honored to take part in the celebration of the 8th anniversary of the 2016 arbitral ruling on the West Philippine Sea. In the past 8 years, the Philippines has consistently strived to uphold our arbitral victory through legal, peaceful, and responsible actions. Despite the challenges posed by illegal, coercive, aggressive, and deceptive activities, the Marcos Jr. administration remains steadfast and committed to addressing existing and emerging maritime dilemmas. This commitment is underscored by the signing of Executive Order 57, entitled Strengthening the Philippines' Maritime Security and Maritime Domain Awareness. This was signed 4 months ago. This executive order empowers interagency coordination mechanisms on maritime concerns through the reorganization of the National Maritime Council and the National Maritime Center, and the creation of the Presidential Office for Maritime Concerns under the Office of the President. The National Task Force West Philippine Sea is now also attached to the Council. From the initial members, the National Maritime Council has been expanded to include 3 additional members: the National Security Advisor, who chairs the NTF WPS, the Solicitor General, and the Director General of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency. The National Maritime Council is being headed by the Executive Secretary. The composition of the Council and supporting agencies is a testament to the cross-sectoral nature of maritime challenges. These challenges are not confined to defense and security and the diplomatic and foreign affairs domains, but have far-reaching implications across various sectors, including agriculture, fisheries, environment, energy, local governance, transportation, and justice. Therefore, the inclusion of the respective heads of government agencies as council members and as support agencies is crucial in addressing these complex and interconnected issues. The Council primarily functions as a central body and in charge of formulating policies and strategies to ensure a unified, coordinated, and effective governance framework to the country's maritime security and domain awareness. Together, the National Maritime Council, the Presidential Office for Maritime Concerns, the National Maritime Center, and the National Task Force West Philippine Sea cooperate in consolidating ways to promote our 2016 arbitral victory in accordance with national and international laws. Within our security landscape, we have already achieved significant progress in internal security as we have fought off local terrorists and insurgents. And moving forward, we are now tasked to protect these hard-earned peace from threats from outside forces that come from the seas and off our shores. Through the Philippines Transparency Initiatives, the public has become deeply aware of the developments in our maritime zones. The situation now requires further attention as we are now concerned of defending our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction. Our defense outlook is now outward-oriented, from our internal waters to the exclusive economic zones. Defending these waters is indeed a challenge considering its vastness. The size of our maritime domain is 7 times larger than our land territory put together. We have also 36,928 kilometers of coastlines, which is the 4th longest in the world. As these maritime concerns evolve, so must our policies and strategies. In addressing emerging threats, we must reconfigure how we do things. Thus, the shift of focus from internal to external security threats means a shift in strategy. This shift is not just a change in direction, but a crucial response to the evolving security landscape. Among our objectives at the National Maritime Council is the crafting of a comprehensive national maritime security policy and strategy that will guide our vision of a secure, maritime, and archipelagic state. Our strategic vision will be anchored in the promotion of the interests of our maritime and archipelagic country. The anticipated national maritime security policy and strategy will consider the gains of existing initiatives such as the national security policy and the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. These documents serve as milestones in realigning the country's archipelagic needs and interests. The government has considered various options and approaches in addressing the maritime issues. In the diplomatic approach, our objective is to gain international support to enable us to achieve our diplomatic and security goals. In this endeavor, we can harness the support offered by our allies and partners. For example, our maritime dialogues have been essential venues for communication and exchanges of ideas on how we can further collaborate. Furthermore, agreements have been entered into with our partners within this year alone. In January of this year, we signed a Memorandum of Understanding on Defense Cooperation with the United Kingdom and Canada, and a Memorandum of Understanding also on incident and management in the South China Sea with Vietnam. The arrangement on the use of the dark vessel detection system was also agreed upon with Canada last year. In February this year, we signed the MOU on enhanced maritime cooperation with Australia. With Germany, our country's transport agencies signed the joint declaration of intent on strengthening cooperation in the maritime sector in March. A result of the bilateral strategic dialogue with the United States last April will be the agreement to deepen cooperation to strengthen efforts in addressing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. An MOU on maritime cooperation with Brunei also was signed last May. We also support regional cooperation through the Philippine Coast Guard's lead role in the recently concluded ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. Among the topics discussed is a proposed draft for the Southeast Asia Protocol of Engagement at Sea, or CPEACE, for Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement. In the same month, the Japan International Cooperation Agency in the Philippines signed a loan agreement to provide Japanese ODA loan for the Maritime Safety Capability Improvement Project for the Philippine Coast Guard. And just last Monday, the reciprocal access agreement with Japan was signed. Later this month, we look forward to the signing of a defense cooperation agreement with Singapore. The Philippines and the members of the World Trade Organization support the entry into force of a WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies. These diplomatic approaches are indicative of the continued support of the international community to the Philippines and are a reflection of our commitment to cooperation and the rule of law. In the informational approach, our focus is on strengthening a unified, coherent, and clear narrative. Our transparency initiative has been successful in countering false narratives and disinformation. While it has achieved in large measure a wide range of public awareness, this transparency initiative needs to evolve to cover other areas and information that needs to be made known in order to sustain awareness and for the international community to see and understand the truthful account of the situation in the South China Sea. In the military approach, the defense institutions are expected to have a well-coordinated implementation of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. The foremost objective of the CADC is to achieve effective control over areas within the Philippine territorial and maritime domains and eventually develop the capability of the AFP to project power in strategic areas. We are also developing the capabilities of the Armed Forces of the Philippines through the ongoing Horizon 3 projects. Economically, we have to be resilient by developing strategic industries that can withstand the effects of what could happen in the West Philippine Sea. We also have to call for additional appropriation to support the development of our capabilities. Aside from these approaches, the National Maritime Security Policy and Strategy will emphasize the integration of efforts of various government agencies. In particular, These agencies have existing programs which are aimed at contributing to the attainment of the national interest. For example, the Department of Foreign Affairs, together with the 98 Philippine embassies around the world, continue to aggressively engage with other countries in ensuring awareness of the 2016 arbitral ruling and what's happening in the South China Sea. The Department of Defense will be implementing the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept that will enhance the capability of our armed forces to secure our territories and seas. The Department of Transportation has allocated funds for the construction of the Lawak Shelter Port project in the Kalayaan Island and for the development and expansion of the Rangkudo Airfield in Pag-asa. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources has efforts in a comprehensive water management project for the municipality of Kalayaan. The Department of Agriculture and the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources is implementing the livelihood activities to enhance fisheries yields and economic gains from the West Philippine Sea, or what we call the Layag West Philippine Sea, and the National Payaw Program, as well as also participates in marine scientific research in the area and supports the Bantay Dagat Program. The Department of Interior and Local Government is leading 10 provinces with their action plans in the West Philippine Sea. It also hosted the National Summit of the West Philippine Sea LGUs last year, and its recent efforts include the Provincial Caravan Bayanihang Adhikain Bayaning Aksyon para sa Kanlurang Dagat ng Pilipinas. The Department of Justice and the Office of the Solicitor General are collaborating to build an environmental case over the destruction of the West Philippine Sea. In addition, the National Maritime Aerial Reconnaissance Center is now activated. These efforts have made valuable contributions. Conscious of each agency's mandates, the positive impact of these programs and initiatives can be further maximized if we work more closely together. The integration of our policies and operations means harmonized, interconnected, and unified plans of action to ensure success. That will be the ways forward for us to undertake. In building our strategy, we look into the experiences of other maritime states. This shall be an opportunity for cooperation with our friends, our allies with whom we share common maritime interests and the vision of a peaceful and stable Indo-Pacific. By reinforcing each other's strengths and complementing gaps, we shall be able to uphold the rule of law and address violations against the rules-based international order that we have built together. Today's commemoration of the 8th anniversary of the 2016 arbitral ruling on the West Philippine Sea reminds us that the Philippines will remain committed to defending our sovereignty, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction within our maritime zones. We recognize that we cannot do this alone. Achieving the goal of free and secure waterways will require the help of our friends within the international community and a strengthened interagency collaboration with a long-term national plan of action in mind. We also take the opportunity to recognize the efforts of those in the private sector, those from the academe, the think tanks, the non-government organizations, business groups, and similar organizations for taking a stand on the West Philippine Sea. While we perform our respective mandates and carry out various initiatives, integrating our efforts will help us achieve our common objective to promote our national interest and defend and secure the territory, our territory and maritime domain. As President Marcos Jr. claimed, we will not yield. The 2016 arbitral ruling is a victory for every Filipino citizen. And with this victory in our hands, let us sail together as patriots in defending our maritime and archipelagic nation. Buong tapang natin ipagtanggol ang ating kalayaan sa West Philippine Sea. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, General Andres Centino. Truly, what we are doing here requires the whole of Philippine society approach. We have the government, the private sector, the civil society working together to stand up for our national sovereignty. But as General Centino said, we cannot do this alone. We also need the help of our like minded partners in the international community. So, thank you very much for the support we're getting in this fight for the West Philippine Sea. So, our next speaker will talk about naval operations and strategic communication in the West Philippine Sea. We are honored to have with us today the spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea from the Philippine Navy, Rear Admiral Roy Vincent Trinidad. Let's all give him a round of applause, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just wait for the PowerPoint to. Okay, this afternoon I'll be giving a short talk. 7 minutes was what was given to me on naval operations and Stratcom in the West Philippine Sea. I'm Rear Admiral Roy Trinidad, the Naval Inspector General, at the same time the Philippine Navy spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea. Next slide, please. Next slide, one click. Naval operations has been traditionally conducted independent of Stratcom, especially in the West Philippine Sea. This started in the early 1990s when we first noticed that there were structures being erected by China after the pullout of the US bases in our shoals, reefs, cays, and shallow areas. It was an issue then that was only within the Philippine Navy. Operations then were conducted. We had Operation Sea Hunt to look for the structures and to blow them up. The Stratcom effort of that operation was zero. The reach of the audience reach of the operations within the organization was only partial. Only those in the know of those type of operations were knowledgeable of what was happening. For societal, the reach was also minimal. Back then, it was an isolated issue that not even the people of Palawan were aware of. So much so that even at the policy level and among our allies and partners, I believe that there was zero reach. At the level, only from the tactical to the operational level, ships all the way up to the Naval Forces, West Command, and maybe even up to Western Command. But beyond that, the reach was very limited. And the duration of the effect of those operations were short-term. I remember when I was at the office of J3, the J3 and the Chief of Staff then was General Bautista here. We had to give information to our friends in media to be able to bring out the reclamation activities of China in the 3 islands that they built, reefs. This was in 2012, 2013. One click, please. One click. Okay. Stratcom was conducted independent of naval operations, but this was more of a civil military operations activity. Meaning to say, even without the corresponding or the operation that was just conducted, the Navy and the AFP would be conducting CMO activities. There was very limited link to a just concluded naval or AFP operation. Again, the reach at the audience for the organization was only partial. For societal reach, it was also partial. Policy level and allies and partners, minimal. And the messaging was not what we intended it to be. While it reached the strategic or the policy level, these strategic communications had very short-term duration, and getting out the right message was not there, considering that the operations had no link to the message. However, one click please. There is an overlap, an intersection between naval operations and strategic communications. One click please. When the President gave the guidance in February of last year that the AFP now has a new mission and we are now shifting from internal security to external defense. This was followed up by the CADC pronunciation by the Secretary of National Defense. We saw the opportunity that naval operations and AFP operations would have to be synced with strategic communications. Along this line, I would like to thank our partners, the Five Eyes, Japan, and other countries France, who have expressed support in the effectiveness of strategic communications. It was a new paradigm for the Navy and the armed forces. We were able to maximize the effect of simple naval operations. We were able to reach tactical, operational, strategic, and policy levels and give out the right message. We could tailor the message for friend or for foe. Today, Stratcom is an integral part of mission planning. Getting the information out first, correcting whatever minor corrections have to be made is important in order to provide for anchoring. Anchoring is having the perception of the public hinge on, lock on to the first message that comes out. This is weaponizing information. In today's warfare, information is as much relevant as it is with the use of force. Have we observed a change in adversary behavior? That remains to be seen. It will take a deeper assessment in order for us to say that our Stratcom and operations or operations at Stratcom have caused a change in the behavior of the adversary. Have we caused the adversary to blink? I would say probably, most likely. And there are some instances recently, probably I could count 4 or 5 instances that if given more detailed study, we cause the adversary to blink based on their actions, but more on based on their pronunciations. Gentlemen, ladies, the thrust for today is external defense. This cannot be done only through operations. More importantly, getting out the right message is equally important. From having to convince the internal stakeholders or the Filipino populace that this is a fight for every Filipino, the thrust now is to convince the international community that this is a fight for the rules-based order. And I would like to thank our partners, ally, and friends, the Five Eyes, Japan, France, and other countries who have not only expressed support, but provided support through multilateral maritime activities, if only to show that the rules-based international order should remain in the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea. Being at the front line of China's expansionist ambitions, the Philippines will continue to stand strong in ensuring that international law will prevail. Today's celebration of the Arbitral Tribunal's decision 8 years ago provides legitimacy to the actions of the Philippine Navy, the AFP, and every Filipino. It is difficult to defeat an organization whose people are convinced by the legitimacy of their actions. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, General Roy Trinidad. Also with us today to talk about harnessing air power to bolster deterrence is the commander of the Air Defense Command of the Philippine Air Force. We are truly honored to welcome this afternoon Major General Fabian Pedregosa. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished ambassadors, and my brother, Professor Manhit, esteemed colleagues and honored guests, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Today, we gather to commemorate a pivotal moment in our nation's history, the anniversary of the award on the South China Sea arbitration, a decision that reaffirmed the Philippines' sovereign rights over the West Philippine Sea. This landmark ruling has fortified our resolve to protect and defend our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and sovereign rights in this vital region. The West Philippine Sea holds immense strategic importance for our nation. It is not just a matter of national pride, but also of national security and economic sustainability. The resources within these waters are crucial for our energy needs, food security, and overall economic development. Thus, protecting our exclusive economic zone, territorial waters, and territorial airspace is paramount. The Philippine Air Force plays an indispensable role in ensuring the security of our territorial airspace and seas. Our Air Force's vigilance and readiness are critical in maintaining the integrity of our skies and maritime domain. By patrolling and safeguarding our airspace, we deter any unauthorized incursions and demonstrate our commitment to defending our sovereignty. Under the Department of National Defense Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense concept, the AAP will project its defense capabilities to secure not only our land base but also our exclusive economic zone and other areas where the Philippines have jurisdiction. Moreover, the Philippine Air Force is a vital support system for our Navy and Coast Guard. From the air, we can provide crucial intelligence, reconnaissance, surveillance, security, and logistical support, enhancing the effectiveness of our maritime security operations. This synergy between our air and maritime forces is essential in responding swiftly and effectively to any threats or emergency in our waters. As we look into the future, the Philippine Air Force will continue to evolve and strengthen its capabilities. Under the AP Modernization Program, it is imperative that we develop our air defense capabilities to protect our nation against all forms of security threats. This includes, first, enhancing our air and maritime domain awareness, which is crucial for early detection and response to any potential threats. Second, we need to improve our capabilities to counter all forms of threats in the land, air, maritime, space, and cyberspace domains. Third, we need to develop a robust training and sustainment system to ensure the 24/7 and 365 operational readiness of our air defense capabilities. Last week, during the 77th Philippine Air Force anniversary, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. assured the whole Philippine Air Force of the administration's support to make the Philippine Air Force agile, strong, and more capable. Interoperability with our allies and like-minded partners is another critical component of our defense strategy. By working closely with our international partners and like-minded nations, we can ensure that our defense systems are integrated and mutually supportive, thereby enhancing our collective security to ensure an open and peaceful West Philippine Sea and Indo-Pacific. To improve interoperability, the Philippine Air Force regularly participates in Balikatan, Cope Thunder, and other bilateral and multilateral exercises. On this note, I would like to thank Her Excellency Mary Kay Carlson for continuing to support the conduct of Balikatan, Cope Thunder in the Philippines. The other day, the Philippine Air Force sent a contingent composed of aircraft and personnel to participate in the Pitch Black exercise 2024 in Darwin, Australia for the first time. The exercise will provide our airmen the experience of deployment and simulated air combat operation on a large force coalition level. Improving our operational readiness and interoperability through Pitch Black exercise is a very important endeavor for the Philippine Air Force. On this note, we'd like to thank Her Excellency Hei Kyong-yu. Ma'am, thank you very much. Also, that deployment is the first overseas deployment of the Philippine Air Force since 1963, a milestone in the Air Force's history. Before I conclude, I would like to say that the issue in West Philippine Sea is a personal matter for me. I used to patrol the West Philippine Sea when I was a young lieutenant until I was a major. So I saw how the development of Chinese structures there grew. And until now, they have already established their 9-dash line and impeding our operations and movement in the West Philippine Sea. So ladies and gentlemen, a call from a senior officer who is about to retire in a few years. Please support the AFP modernization program. We need a strong armed forces of the Philippines, and we need a strong Philippine Coast Guard to defend our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and sovereign rights. In conclusion, as we celebrate the anniversary of the arbitral ruling, let us reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding our sovereignty and territorial integrity. The Philippine Air Force will continue to stand vigilant, protecting our skies and supporting our maritime forces, ensuring that our nation remains secure and prosperous. The Philippine Air Force and the whole AFP is committed and vow to protect our seas, our rights, and our future, ang ating karagatan, karapatan, at kinabukasan. Together, we stand strong in the defense of our beloved Philippines and to the call of the President that we, Filipinos, will not yield. Thank you very much. Mabuhay po ang Pilipinas.
Thank you very much, General Fabian Pedregosa. Our final speaker for this panel will talk about civil maritime cooperation, strengthening the role of the Coast Guard in maritime security. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have with us today Commandant of the Philippine Coast Guard, Admiral Ronnie Hill Gavan.
I think I am the most fortunate speaker today because I am given the last slot. So I need not say anything, but just summarize everything that was said. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Manhit for the honor to be here today. Actually, I did not come here because of your invitation. I came here because of the invitation of Adri through my son. Can you please stand up? Both of you. The culprits why I am here today. I'd like to take this honor as well to recognize the icon of the arbitral award. If I can have the honor, sir, Honorable Justice Antonio Carpio, to please stand up. Through 8 years of victory, you have been the icon of this country. For the Coast Guard, the arbitral award is very significant, foremost because we are a law enforcement agency. I'd like to recognize the newly minted secretary in charge of everything maritime security, Secretary Andy Centeno, sir. Your Excellencies, the wind beneath the wings of the Philippine Coast Guard.
Thank you very much, ma'am and sir. My deputy commandant for operation is here, who flew all the way from the north to give moral support to his underclassman. Please stand up, sir. Admiral Doy Ponsalan. Fellow workers in the government, enthusiasts or professionals on maritime security, students, good afternoon. Please allow me to start by talking about maritime security by going back to the statement of the President during the Shangri-La Dialogue, when he clearly and in most eloquent way identified the realities that affect the state of the South China Sea. First, he said that the future of the region, more specifically as driven by the West Philippine Sea, is determined by many nations. He also said that the strategic competition between China and the United States will continue to drive the events in the area. Third, he said that ASEAN will remain central but challenged. Fourth, the geopolitics will continue to permeate almost everything. Fifth, he said that the global commons will continue to be crucial to all, including those who have less access to it. Sixth, climate change will be the world's most fundamental challenge to humankind. And finally, he also made mention about the boon and bane brought by technology in the things we do to secure the West Philippine Sea. He also said very clearly where his agencies involved in security should go. One, we should project power wherever it is necessary as a matter of duty and as a matter of legal right. While on the other hand, we should continue to invest in diplomacy. It is where the one at sea concept of the Coast Guard has came in. 13 years ago, I don't know what it is, but I think we had the opportunity to see that these things are forthcoming. We published a very, very straightforward paper. It's called Organized National Engagement at Sea, or One at Sea, where we define the spectrum of threat or conflict from peacetime to crisis to wartime as a reflection, as an equation of systems, a system of subsystems that comprise maritime security. In that illustration, we defined or we identified that on the left end, the civil maritime security component of the country plays its role. On the far right, on the far end right, the military performs the war-fighting role. It is in the middle, during crisis, where the two connives. And in everything, collaboration is critical. It was also defined at the time 13 years ago that the Coast Guard will be playing a crucial role at the stage when the country is approaching the far end, where the policy is towards the escalation of conflict. It is where Coast Guard diplomacy or White Hull diplomacy was born 13 years ago. That diplomacy effort, or an attempt to be an effort, follows 3 lines of effort. Number 1, we intend the Coast Guard to pursue maritime domain awareness and response based on the law of the sea, our national laws. And we are very, very fortunate because the Arbitral Award came in the way. It defined the authorizing environment within which the Coast Guard can do its role. Second, through Coast Guard diplomacy, we intended to strengthen our coastal state administration or fortifying our presence in areas where we have jurisdiction. So along with other government agencies, we established Coast Guard stations in the islands and islets occupied by us. And we performed roles including aids to navigation, including search and rescue, including determination of the weather in the area through PAGASA, to show the world that we have jurisdiction over these places. And third, which is very, very significant to date, international cooperation and engagement. It's the reason why I said, Your Excellencies had been or have been the wind beneath our wings. The Coast Guard did not intend to be a rider in this game. We want to be a driver. With all opportunities at hand as the non-military component of this game, we pursued the development of several platforms in the region. One, in 2014, we encouraged our fellow Coast Guards to come together, those in Southeast Asia, and form the more ASEAN-centric groupings of Coast Guard we call the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. The intention of that platform is to create a norm which we hope can stimulate or maybe guide the behaviors of those who intends to come to our place. We also became very active in several platforms, including Southeast Asian Maritime Law Enforcement Initiative, Maritime Law Enforcement Dialogue, humanitarian HDI, the Humanitarian Dialogue Initiative, and several fora, which seeks to bring together the Coast Guards in the region. We have been saying that we are in the right side of this equation. And I say so. The Philippine Coast Guard has now enjoyed, I think, around 80% approval from our people, or around 8 in every 10 Filipinos believe that we are the right thing. Maybe Coast Guard diplomacy has place in securing the maritime security of this country. We have all the opportunities with us. And with this, I don't think we will fail. With you. For as long as we continue to collaborate, because maritime security does not belong to us alone, the uniformed services. Because at the end of the day, we will only be just a function of you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Admiral Ronnie Hill Gavan. At this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion. So may we request our speakers to please join us again on stage. General Andres Centino, Admiral Roy Trinidad, General Fabian Pedregosa, and Admiral Ronnie Gavan. And to moderate the discussion, may we call on the President and founder of the International Development and Security Cooperation, or Corporation, also a non-resident fellow of the Stratbase ADR Institute, Dr. Chester Cabalza.
All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm very happy to be seated right beside the top decision makers in protecting our West Philippine Sea. West Philippine Sea, of course. I have a few questions first individually, then later on we will open it to the audience. I think I'll start with Gerald Centino. I think the gist of your presentation earlier is about harmonization. There was the NCWC to NMC, which is NTF is under, NTF WPS is under that. How do we assert now this national sovereignty, territorial integrity, economic rights, given that, of course, as mentioned by Ambassador HK earlier, aggression is the new norm in the West Philippine Sea? Can you give some insights about that?
Thank you. In my remarks earlier, I made mention about the President signing Executive Order 57. This created the important entity, the National Maritime Council, which is being headed by no less than the Executive Secretary. We have under the Council 12 cabinet secretaries from the Defense, from the Foreign Affairs, from the local government, from energy, from agriculture, including the National Security Advisor and also the Director General of the Intelligence Coordinating Agency, and significantly the Solicitor General. Why the Solicitor General? Because one of the things that the Council is endeavoring to undertake is the possible filing of another legal case. And significantly, we have the Department of Justice Secretary and the Solicitor General collaborating to prepare for this option if in the event this will be considered by the Council. So this is really a manifestation of collaboration among agencies. It is not just a defense or a foreign affairs domain. In fact, the different departments also have the agencies considered support agencies. We have the Coast Guard, of course, the Armed Forces of the Philippines. The Philippine National Police, by the way, is part of the support agencies. We have the Maritime Group of the Philippine National Police, the Bureau of Fisheries, even the Bureau of Customs, the Drug Enforcement Agency is also there. So this is really a whole of nation approach that we are undertaking. Mentioned earlier by the different speakers, they were telling us that we cannot do this single-handedly. We have to collaborate, we have to cooperate, we have to use all approaches in order that we have the best decisions, the best actions to take in addressing the situation in the West Philippine Sea.
Okay, so thank you for that answer, sir. Admiral Roy, of course, one of the revolutionary policies right now of the government, particularly the Department of National Defense, is the CADC, the Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense Doctrine, that prioritizes the integration of the modern technological defense system. So how do we reinforce this, given that, of course, now the strategy of the armed forces is external defense?
The comprehensive archipelagic defense concept is at the level of DND. At the level of the AFP, it is, we now call it the Comprehensive Archipelagic Defense Strategy. At the AFP's level, we are developing our capabilities to be able to secure and to protect all the way up to the exclusive economic zone and even beyond. However, it will take more than just the AFP to get there. We need to develop a very strong industrial base, defense industrial base, that will allow us to be able to produce what we need. Not only the hardware, but if you are to look at around the world, experiences, asymmetric capabilities, cheaper, more expedient, involving the local workforce, then we could be able to leverage on our strength and to look at the adversary and look at his weakness. So the CADC is comprehensive. It's not only the hardware itself. It includes the mindset, includes capacitating our people, but more importantly, the defense industrial base.
Okay. All right. General Fabian, this morning we saw 25 countries supporting us in the Arbitral award.
Yeah.
In the recent Balikatan exercises, you have 14 countries supporting us. And then, of course, recently Japan signed the reciprocal access agreement with us after the US with the visiting forces agreement, and of course with Australia with its SOFA. And soon to be other countries would want to forge defense agreements with us. So how do we sustain this defense cooperation, given that of course, Air Force is one of the components of external defense?
The Philippine Air Force is very active in collaborating with our counterparts, especially through bilateral and multilateral exercises. One of the reasons is to ensure that we are interoperable with them in terms of techniques, tactics, and procedures, that we speak the same language that we follow the same procedure as we operate together in the conduct of maritime cooperative activities, particularly with the United States and other nations as well. And the pitch black exercise is composed of or participated by more or less 20 plus countries. And in this exercise, our Philippine Air Force will be exposed in coordinating and interoperating with all of them. So going back to the CADC, the training of our personnel, our airmen and our women, in terms of the TTPs or techniques, tactics, procedures, and interoperability is part of projecting air power through our CADC. And we need to develop not only the equipment that we have, but also our officers and enlisted personnel so that they are capable of operating the modernization equipment that we will get and making it interoperable with our partners and allies.
Okay, thank you for that, sir. Admiral Gavan, I have two questions for you. You mentioned about the organized national spectrum. Can you enlighten us about this archipelagic consciousness in trying to defend our external defense capabilities?
Yes.
Secondly, I've talked to some foreign journalists from Hong Kong, and then they were saying that as long as China is not using its People's Liberation Army Navy, that's the reason why they are using their China Coast Guard. Then that means that they are not ready for war. Your comments about that?
Okay, first about the one at sea. The one at sea was an attempt to illustrate the reality about maritime security, that actually it involves myriad of laws applicable to different jurisdictions as what we are trying to define now as maritime zones. So from peacetime to wartime, there will be specific state responses that should be done, and these state responses are designed to be conducted by different arms of government, from civilian to military. But if you, group all of them, they actually compose the national force, which we call the one at sea. The spectrum from peacetime to wartime, if we are to illustrate it further, from left to right or horizontally, it says peacetime, crisis, dispute, and war. The Coast Guard, as it turned out, as what we anticipated it to be 13 years ago, might be playing the crucial role in the de-escalation of conflict because of the very nature of our existence. We are white, we are humanitarian, but we also do defense role and law enforcement role in one without diluting the purity of our being white. That is the strength of the Coast Guard. And vertically, from low, medium to high intensity, we are also being employed and deployed accordingly. We just have to illustrate it very clearly. And I think it can help guide the collaboration that we have been talking about. Because without a construct that would define how we should collaborate based on the realities on the ground, collaboration will just remain the most abused word. We have to be very, very clear on that. On the second question or comment, I am not sure if it is within my pay grade to comment on that. Suffice to say, however, that maybe Coast Guards have this unique utility in the game at hand. States use their Coast Guard to project state intent when they don't want to send it very strongly. And I think that should remain in us. But there's a risk. When Coast Guards become Navy cloak in white, And that's why we in the Philippine Coast Guard has been trying to protect the purity of our white. We have to remain rules-based, we have to remain non-military, and we have to remain calm and professional, but determined. Because that is our brand. We are not a Navy in white. We are Coast Guard.
Excellent, excellent. Now, let's open the floor to everyone. Please state your name and affiliation before you say your question. Siguro, okay, Professor De Castro.
I would like to specifically direct my question to Rear Admiral Roy Trinidad regarding a recent development of the passage of a Chinese carrier battle group that did not pass through the Bashi Channel, but instead passed through the Balintang. Of course, historically, if the Chinese would send their carrier battle group, it would pass through Bashi Channel as a signal to Taiwan. But this time, they went to the Balintong Strait, which I think is really directed to us, and the fact that that carrier battle group is conducting a naval exercise with the Russian Navy. How is this viewed by the Philippine Navy and, of course, by the Armed Forces of the Philippines?
Thank you. The passage of the Shandong Battle Group and the Sovereignty class cruiser of the Russian Navy was monitored to different sources, and when it came to the attention of the Philippine Navy, lots of calls came in from our partners and friends in media. First and foremost, we have to understand that developing aircraft carriers and their use in battle will take decades. The United States of America has been practicing naval warfare with the use of aircraft carriers for the past, how many? 8 decades? 7 to 8 decades. Getting there will take a lot of effort, sacrifices, exercises. I would like to say that China is not there yet. While they have the intent to have the capability to project power to the use of aircraft carriers, getting to the level of being a professional naval force, projecting power through aircraft carriers is a long way from them. This was a simple passage. They are still perfecting some of their systems, takeoff and landings, deck carrier landings. It is an activity that we have monitored. Are we concerned? Not so much, as we know it's still a long way from getting there. If they were sending a message, it was not only to the Philippines, it was also a message to our neighbors in the region, Vietnam, Taiwan. This also coincides with the thrust of the PLA to increase the number of ships, which began in the early 1990s. From warships, cruisers, destroyers, they now have carriers, and they would like to perfect that. But again, while we view it with just awareness, for them to be able to get to that level of projecting air power through carriers is still a long way off. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Yeah. Question about for the Navy to worry. I think what we would be more worried is that we are not able to detect these intrusions. Fortunately, we have this capability to find out what's going in and out, but there's still big room for improving our capabilities. General Pedregosa mentioned earlier the need to improve the capability for maritime domain awareness. For now, we are able to detect, but the maritime domain is so vast. It's not just the West Philippine Sea, by the way. It's a bigger area also in the other side, the Benham Rise, and even the southern part. There's a big maritime area that needs to be monitored. And what's good in that incident, we were able to monitor the foreign ships passing through even Basilan Strait and Cebu to Passage. And yes, what would worry us if we're not able to detect these intrusions?
If I may add, just would like to give recognition to whom it is due. In the north, actually, the Coast Guard has a vessel traffic monitoring capability. I think it's just a matter of improving the connectivities that we have. The United States has actually helped us come up with a very good facility. The Coast Guard has been well assisted by our friends, allies, actually our family. Ma'am. Thank you.
Any other questions from from the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Ellen Tordesillas of Vera Files. I'd like to direct my question to Admiral Ascendino. Um, you underscored the fact that the National Maritime Council coordinates with the 12 cabinet secretaries. Yeah. And that's reassuring because we are rather bothered by what happened last June 17. Uh, because I remember the press con that Executive Secretary Bersamin and you gave, where that describing the incident as something like an accident or a misunderstanding, and that from then on you said that what the de-escalation efforts would be to clear with the Chinese every time there would be a RORE. And then 2 days, I think a few days after, Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro and even the President repudiated your statement, saying that it was a deliberate act by the Chinese and that they would never ask permission, they would never inform the Chinese of their schedule in the next RORE. I'm rather worried about the situation that looks like the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, and that's very worrisome. Well, not only for me, but I mean for the problem. Please reassure us that you're getting your act together.
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. And by the way, I was never assigned with the Philippine Navy, so I couldn't get the rank of admiral. Two guys here are the admirals. I was with the infantry all my life, and well, an infantry guy being tasked to do maritime job. Anyway, again, thank you for the question, ma'am. What happened after June 17? There was a meeting of the National Maritime Council on that Friday. I think that was June 21, June 21. That was the second time that the council convened after it was organized like 3 months ago. So everyone was there. It was actually a big attendance of all the primary cabinet members. The executive secretary presided the meeting. The secretary of defense was there. I think the undersecretary of the foreign affairs was there. And almost a majority of those attending the meeting were the principal cabinet members. And during that meeting, there was a discussion on what recommendations to give to the president. And the consensus was that there was a list of recommendations that was agreed upon by all the attendees. And after the meeting, maybe late afternoon, we were being summoned by the president, and we submitted. I was there, not part of the council, but as secretary to the council. So we submitted the recommendations to the president for his approval and consideration. There was no decision yet. And so after that meeting, a press conference was held. With the executive secretary, I was tagged along to be with the ES to have the press con. And truly it was said that one of the recommendations was for the public announcement of the resupply. So that should be made clear that what was announced during that day, during that press conference, were recommendations still for approval by the President. 2 days after, the President, together with the Secretary of Defense, visited Western Command and had the first or the chance to talk with those actually sent to Ayungin to perform the resupply. And it was there during that meeting, the briefing from the commander of the Western Command, that he had this conclusion that it was an intentional action on the part of China. Hence, the following day on a Monday, a press conference with the SND and the NSA, and I think Undersecretary Tess Lazaro was there, announcing the President's decision on the recommendations that we submitted the Friday before. So it should be made clear that there was no contradiction. It was a recommendation that was announced on a Friday, and the decision of the President was announced on that Monday. And again, the Secretary of National Defense, Yusek Lazaro, and NSA were also there during that Monday during the meeting. So please be assured that, it is 3 months since the council has been established. It is the second meeting, but be assured that it is a collegial body, a composition of senior level cabinet members that will give the sound recommendations to the President. And I will relay your concern, ma'am, to my chairman, E.S. Bersamin, of this concern. But be assured that the council is trying its best to implement what's being stated under the executive order signed by the President.
So, okay, so we heard from General Centino that we are reassured for that. Next question, please.
Good afternoon. I am Attorney Bien Lawrence Cabato. I'm from the team of University of Asia in the Pacific. I just have a question. I think most of our topic, I understand, is about our maritime security. I appreciate that for the last few years, the Philippine Navy has improved on its active archipelagic defense strategy. But I have another concern. I am aware on the fact that our defense is premium on the infantry level, as in our defense of the mainland. Now, are there any concerns? Because it seems that for the last few years, although it's not that much put in media, although it's creeping out the reality. There are things that show that it seems that China has been infiltrating inside the country. Like, well, of course, we know the Pogos. That's one manifestation. But I'm also aware that sometimes there are news reports I see. There would be Chinese going amok in a bar. Then I always see the IDs. It's always People's Liberation Army. Dun sa ID, okay? Is aside from our maritime security, is our internal defense, the army, do they anticipate any internal attack because of, there might be infiltration going on right now with respect to China here in the Philippines?
Who wants to answer that?
Thank you.
Infiltration. Admiral
We
Roy.
have to understand first and foremost a Chinese warfighting thought vis-a-vis Western warfighting thought. The Philippines, our systems and processes are geared towards Western thought. We first exhaust all instruments of national power before we go to the last option, the last instrument, which is the military. In Chinese warfighting thought, at the very onset, it's an interplay of all instruments, all dimensions of national power to include the military. So they will be using the non-military instruments to achieve military objectives. What is happening right now in the West Philippine Sea should not cloud our vision that there may be other instruments of national power from the Chinese Communist Party at play on land. Non-military instruments, political, economic, our power grid, education. Are these activities already threats to the country? No. Are they areas for concern? Yes. The approach there is to have a citizenry that is aware that all instruments of national power of the Chinese Communist Party may already be at play internally or on land. And if there is any reason for our citizenry to suspect something out of the normal, to inform the appropriate government agency. These developments that the country is facing is a very good opportunity for us to come together as a nation, for our different government agencies to work more closely together to ensure not only defense and security is upheld, but more importantly, public safety. Thank you.
All right, maybe we can entertain 3 more questions. Okay, yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a retired Commander Leo Ordenes. I'm one of the regional special warfare officers assigned to West Philippine Sea. We didn't call it before West Philippine Sea. It's called Kalayaan Island Groups. It's called Kalayaan Chain of Islands. I was there 1992 until 2002 when I became Operations Director of Naval Forces West under WESCOM. For people who are harking about the war, what we were doing there before, if you were not still born, or you were babies, or you're still in grade school, we explosively demolish all markers of China, all shelters, and sometimes boats. We board and search their militia boats. And what do we see inside militia boats? Bribe money. How do I know that? It's because I was one of those officers who was exposed to that. You go up board and search, they will offer you money that's about 5 million pesos. So if your head and your heart is not strong, you will give in and you will not report to WESCOM what's happening there. During those times, a Navy officer is also a Coast Guard officer. It's only in 1998 that we became separate Coast Guard. I was station commander of Brooks Point, 4th Coast Guard District. Now, is our military going to help in the exploration, development, and the harnessing of oil and gas in the West Philippine Sea inside our territories? Because it's been over 32 years when I first made those recommendations to my ComWestCom. And we haven't still fortified our nine naval establishments or detachment. So is our military, our armed forces going to fortify it? Are we going to use our oil and gas? That's worth, one quadrant is worth $100 trillion. And according to my British and Danish friends, if we harness our oil and gas and not let China get that, we will able to have and give to our citizens $300,000 each as pension. And I believe them because I work with them. And we got a lot of oil and gas in there. So when are we going to do that? And when are we going to fortify our naval detachments? And then, with those money and revenues, we can now modernize our armed forces, all the jets that we need. You guys sent me overseas in 1997. I had 80 Taiwanese pilots classmates studying English in Lackland Air Force Base, DLI. They don't wear uniforms, but they're ready to fight, and now they have their jets.
Okay,
So
okay.
when are we going to get our jets?
Let's now listen to the answers of our panelists. Okay. Anyone? Please.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the question on are we improving our occupied features? We are occupying actually 9 features in the West Philippine Sea. The biggest one is Pag-asa Island. We are improving our facilities there. In fact, funds have been released to make sure that we are able to provide the sufficient sufficient facilities for our personnel deployed in these areas. Of course, we have only the Pag-asa Island with an airstrip there. It's about the 1,500 meter airstrip. It's except for that we can't reclaim we are not reclaiming the other features, but we are improving the facilities and making sure that we have sufficient equipment and the appropriate number of personnel deployed in these areas. So we're doing that. As to the question if we are going to pursue with our oil exploration, there are existing service contracts. I could not just specify the exact number as to how many service contracts do we have there in that part of the West Philippine Sea, but this is one of the programs under consideration by the Department of Energy, which is part of the National Maritime Council.
Okay, Admiral Gavan, and then of course Admiral Trinidad later on.
Yeah, to disabuse public minds. The collaboration among the security sector agencies have been very vibrant since we decided to double down our efforts in the area. I will focus on the exploration. This year alone, we were able to conduct 2 seismic surveys in the northeast and the northwest of Palawan. With very good coordination amongst all of us, those activities went, uninterrupted through and through. My point is, conducting activities does not only involve operational intervention. There are other covers necessary, including politics or political, economic. So we are not the only ones who should define success and failure on the ground. But rest assured, sir, that the security sector, meaning the uniformed services, have been doing their job to make sure that the other arms of government in charge in doing their thing to secure the country succeed. In a more specific way also, the Coast Guard have since established stations in not only in the main island of Pag-asa, but also in the islets. In fact, a few days ago, we sent some equipment to our personnel there. We're doing our job, but not us alone, in concert with all members of society. So it is beyond us to define success and failure on the ground. We are just one of the players in this game.
Okay, not, of course, Gerald Fabian.
Let me answer about the development in our islands in the West Philippine Sea. I will talk particularly in Pag-asa Island. I have one unit there performing security operations. And we are improving Pag-asa Island and fortifying it. And soon, there will be some equipment there that will improve its security and defense posture. Now, for the West Philippine Sea, particularly in the Calayan Island Group, we now have the capability to monitor our territorial airspace and the airspace beyond our territorial waters going to the Calayan Island chain. And soon we will have another sensor down south that will further improve that capability. We also regularly patrol Reed Bank, our Malampaya National oil platform. And soon, the coordination, the command and control system in that area will also be established. Right now, be rest assured that the Armed Forces of the Philippines, through the AFP modernization program and coordination and training with our allies and friends, we are continuing to improve our capability to monitor our maritime domain and in the future, secure and defend it. Thank you.
Okay, down to our last question.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ted Lerner. I'm a journalist with PhilPro Tayo. We hear a lot of the phrase, the international rules-based order. And in the West Philippine Sea, South China Sea, that order would be UNCLOS. And I believe it's 164 countries have signed UNCLOS, but one country who hasn't signed UNCLOS is the number one ally of the Philippines, the United States. So how does that affect your mission and your ability to solve this very complex issue when your number one ally doesn't sign up to the rules-based international order of the South China Sea?
Yeah. UNCLOS has become part of customary international law. And I think that explains it. The United States has been consistent in observing the principles of that law. It has not affected us negatively at all. In fact, the United States, in the case of the Coast Guard, has provided so many training programs to ensure that our people knows the rules, knows the law. Because as law enforcers, that is the fundamental requirement for us. So in fairness to the United States, they have been very, very beneficial partner of the Coast Guard at least. As you can see, the Coast Guard has been very consistent in promoting rules-based approach. We have remained calm, we have remained professional, we have been never antagonized by the other. We have kept our ground, we observe the rules because we know the rules. Thanks to the United States for providing us with the opportunity to learn. It has not affected at all. While they have not signed, it is a customary international law. I think that explains it.
Well, if I could just follow up on that. You talk a lot about that this is a problem that will require a coalition. Your friends, your allies. So yes, while you may be following the rules, how can you lecture China? How can the United States, as part of this coalition, lecture China when they've signed it, even though they're not following it, but the United States hasn't signed it, because they can turn around and just say, well, the United States hasn't signed it, stop lecturing us. I mean, it would seem to be a little bit of a fault in this system that you're trying to, this coalition.
Go ahead, Commodore Trinidad.
That's at the policy level, Ted. At the strategy level, I would say that actions speak louder than a mere signature.
Gerald Centino.
Yeah, Ted, what would really worry us is that if we have, it wouldn't scare us a lot if there's one who is not a party to an agreement, but does not in any way violate the norms. And here comes one who is a party to a convention, but continues to violate. That is what is worrisome.
Okay. Shell Fabian.
We regularly do exercises and maritime cooperative activities with the United States. And they have all espoused an open and free Indo-Pacific. What we oppose from China, it is maritime expansionist activity in the South China Sea, calling the South China Sea and the West Philippine Sea as its own lake. My God, that is a expansionist action of a country that wants to dominate the whole world. So that is what we are fighting for. We want to fight for our sovereign rights, our territorial integrity, and our sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea. Okay.
One. Okay, last. Para sa mga kaibigan natin sa WPS. Sige.
Mr. Leonardo Quaresma po, presidente po ng New Masinloc Fisherman Association mula po sa lalawigan po ng Zambales. Sa kalagayan po naming mga mangingisda ngayon ay kami po ay nangangamba dahil sa mga ganitong nangyayari po sa ating karagatan, na maging ang ating mga Philippine Coast Guard natin ay nasasaktan. So, ang nais ko lang din pong sanang itanong ay ano po yung seguridad na konkreto na maaari po naming asahan bilang mga mangisda na nangyayari po ngayon sa kasalukuyan sa ating pong West Philippine Sea dahil tuwing pumapalaot po kami ay nangangamba po kami na hindi namin alam kung makakabalit pa po kami ng buhay o hindi na sa amin po mga pagpapalaot. Kaya nangangamba po kami, una-una nakikita rin po namin yung nangyayari po sa ating mga Philippine Coast Guard na sila man din po ay nasasaktan. At may napapanood din po kami na nangyayari na sinasabi nyo po sa ating maritime security na pagka gumamit sila ng patalim ay gagamit din po tayo ng patalim. At kung gumagamit sila ng palakol ay gagamitan din po ng palakol. Pangalawang tanong ko po ngayon, kung ginamitan po tayo ng baril, gagamit din po ba tayo ng baril? So yun po ang aking katanungan, sir. At kung ano rin po yung ating kasiguruhan ng mga mangisda.
Yung isa lang. Yung isa po siguro sa amin po yan. Yung pag-secure ng fishermen. Kasama pa rin naman din po namin yung Philippine Navy at yung BFAR. Makakaasa po kayo na yung Coast Guard naman po ay nandun. Napatunayan in recent time na talagang mayroong Coast Guard ship na nandun sa mga fishing grounds. Hindi lang natin pwedeng sabihin kung saan, napaka-operational, it is very operational. But the recent incident involving one fisherman, naagapan po siya, the Coast Guard was able to respond because we were there. And we are there up to this day. On the other issue, I think it did not come from the Coast Guard. I have a different policy guidance to my people. So I think the Navy will answer that one.
Kailangan po maintindihan natin ano yung nasa isip ng mga China, incheck, pagdating sa giyera. We have to understand again Chinese warfighting doctrine. It is I will argue that they will not fire the first shot in the West Philippine Sea. Hindi po sila mag-umpisa na sila muna ang magpapaputok. Ngunit gagawin nila lahat para udyukan tayo na tayo ang magpaputok. Kung hindi natin alam yan, na tayo inuudyukan lamang, baka yung huling rory natin noong June 17, may hindi ka nais-nais na nangyari. It is for that reason that the rules of engagement given to our troops in the West Philippine Sea are very clear. The rules of engagement mention that the use of force is not allowed for mission accomplishment without infringing, of course, on the universal right of self-defense, defense of others, or defense of your unit. Ang rules of engagement, hindi pinapayagan ang paggamit ng puwersa o pagpapaputok ng baril o militar na armas na hindi naman siya sumasaklaw sa self-defense. Yung karapatang pantao na depensa ng sarili mo, yung kasamahan mo, o yung unit mo. Ito ay binibigay namin sa aming kasundaluhan sa West Philippine Sea sapagkat alam natin na uudyukan tayo na magpaputok at magbibigay ng dahilan sa kanila na tataasan nila ang kaguluhan at ang dahilan nila tayo ang nagpasimuno. Salamat po.
Okay, I think the best lesson that we have learned this afternoon is that a true friend does not forsake us. A true friend does not bully us. Okay, thank you very much to our finest Coast Guardian, Army, Sailor, and Pilot. All right, maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much to our panelists and moderator for a very informative panel discussion. And may we invite Professor Manhit for a photo opportunity with the panel.
Set up po yun. Yung police na lang, wala. Walang police. Dapat natin. Basta,
All right. Once again, thank you very much to our panelists, General Santino, Admiral Trinidad, General Pedregosa, and Admiral Gavan. All right. Okay. So we will now proceed to our fourth panel. Okay. 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 All right. Again, once again, thank you very much to our panelists from the Philippine military and the Philippine Coast Guard. Okay. So we've been together for 6 hours now, and we have just one final panel. But don't go away yet. Don't go home just yet, because this last panel is going to be a very interesting one as well. Okay? Okay. Okay, may we request everyone to please take your seats so we can now proceed with our program. Mhm. Okay. Again, may we request everyone to please take your seats so we can now proceed with the rest of our program. Okay. All right. Thank you. So earlier, we talked about the government and the military's efforts in defending our rights in the West Philippine Sea. Now, alongside these efforts, we witnessed national security and foreign policy experts, including various academic institutions, think tanks, and the media, work together to address China's gray zone activities and defend the rules-based international order and the Philippine sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea. Today, we have a distinguished panel of experts who will delve into these issues, sharing insights on how the Philippines has effectively and responsibly responded to these challenges. They will discuss the strategic measures taken, the role of international partnerships, and the continuous efforts to counter disinformation and propaganda. Joining us this afternoon to shed light on gray zone operations through satellite imaging is Project Sea Light Director and non-resident fellow of Stratbase ADR Institute, retired U.S. Air Force Colonel Raymond Powell. Let's give him a round of applause, please.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you for sticking around for this last panel. Do you know, it was 1 year ago at this exact place, at the same, on the same date, at the same event, that we actually officially launched Sea Light as an independent effort from the Gordian Knot Center. So it's really incredible to see where it's come since then. And as a newly minted, Joyce, you forgot to mention that this is the first time you've ever mentioned that I'm now a non-resident fellow with Stratbase, and as a newly minted one, I am going to now go off script. And I'm not actually going to talk about satellite imaging, sorry, Joyce, because I have been spending a lot of this week answering a question that I would like to address directly. And so I've been around Manila a little bit, and the question is, has transparency failed? Has transparency failed? Why is this question coming up? Because the events of June 17th and those leading into that have brought into light the question of why is China not deterred by transparency? Now, that's a fair question. But I want to kind of take a step back, and as I've been thinking about this question, I've been thinking about the answer in terms of failed to do what exactly? What did we actually think was China was going to, or transparency was going to do? And since I happen to have written a paper on this and published it through Stratbase in January, which you're free to go look up. I wanted to sort of go back over the things that we thought that transparency could achieve, and let's examine whether or not we think transparency has failed. So the first thing we said is that transparency is not itself a strategy. It is a tactic. It is something that you do to achieve a larger strategy. We've heard now from some of our other speakers and panelists, for example, General Centino talked about the new national strategy, Maritime strategy, right? And how transparency has fed into that strategy. So what does it do? It sets certain conditions for success. That success may look like deterrence, or it may look like defeating gray zone strategies used by an adversary. And the first condition that we talk about in the paper is national resilience. And I want you to look at the Philippines right now in July of 2024 and ask you whether national resilience is being achieved, right? We have with us today a civil society group which has staged so far 2 missions out into the West Philippine Sea in order to demonstrate that commitment to national to seeing the national resilience achieved. We have seen budgets increase. We have seen commitments to purchase new Coast Guard ships. We've seen a national military or a national maritime or a national military strategy focused on archipelagic defense. We now have a National Maritime Council. We see evolving popular support. So you tell me whether it has succeeded in helping to achieve national resilience. In a democracy, if you do not have the support of the people, you do not have resilience. You have, in order to do all of those things that I just said, you need the people behind you, and the way that the Philippines got there was through transparency. Second, our second condition for success, international support. Everybody saw 25 ambassadors standing up here in the front to celebrate this arbitral ruling. By the way, I was here last year. This is a much larger event than it was a year ago, and a year ago it was large. We saw recently the president of the Philippines invited to Washington, D.C. to attend a trilateral summit with Japan. We saw a Luzon Economic Corridor announced as part of that with commitments from the U.S. and Japan to support semiconductor manufacturing here in the Philippines. We've recently heard about a commitment from the United States to help the Philippines to develop nuclear power. We just saw the signing of a reciprocal access agreement with Japan. We've seen the Canadian ambassador stood up here and talked about the dark vessel detection that the Canada has provided to the Philippines. And the speaker at the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, the keynote speaker, they only get one of those a year, was the president of the Philippines. All of that came about because people are paying attention to the Philippines. I will tell you, as a person who's worked in 2 embassies, every embassy in the world, all 173 of them, or however many there are now, are screaming to Washington, D.C. to say, pay attention to us. But Washington, D.C. and many, many other capitals around the world are paying attention to the Philippines, and that's why those things are happening. That's why the Philippines is achieving some of these benefits. That is a result of transparency because people see the pictures, they see the video, they understand what's happening. Ray Powell, sitting in his pajamas in Palo Alto, California, tracking ships on a computer, can show you little squiggly lines on a map. It is the Philippines Assertive Transparency campaign that has delivered these benefits to the Philippines. Third, we talked about reputational cost. And it is true that the cost that China has paid internationally has not yet led to its deterrence, or at least not that we can tell. However, it has certainly led to China's isolation on the international stage in increasing measure. China has succeeded through its aggression and based in large part on the Philippines' decision to be transparent in uniting the free and open world against its aggression. So we actually see China's strategy writ large being defeated. Now, that has not led to a more stable situation around Ayungin Shoal. I get it. But it is leading to a larger, if you can zoom out a little bit and see who is winning the argument over the West Philippine Sea, China is feeling the crunch. I know, unfortunately, so that you don't have to, I read Chinese propaganda. I'm in Chinese propaganda. And they are concerned about their standing in the international stage. The reputational costs are being imposed, and China is paying them, and that is costing China. And it is actually benefiting the Philippines, which now, as we've seen today, is finding itself further and further woven into a network of partners and allies that it can increasingly turn to. You know, before this, the world's largest democracy, the world's most populous country now is India. And India, which had not previously declared itself to be a supporter of the Arbitral Tribunal ruling, has, within the last several months, has come out in support. The Philippines is finding itself supported on the international stage, and it's taking it's more than just statements. It is actual material benefits that are coming to the Philippines. So I will remain a staunch advocate of transparency, not just because I think that it works. And by the way, it's not a strategy all by itself. It is an important weapon in the arsenal of a democracy whose case is based on being right. And I think what we're talking about with this arbitral tribunal celebration, this commemoration, is that's what was demonstrated 8 years ago, is that the Philippines is in the right. Transparency serves the right, the party that is in the right. And it is also a fundamental value, a fundamental supercharger of a democracy. It belongs, transparency belongs in a democracy. Let the authoritarians rely on their national propaganda budget. The Philippines has right on its side, and when it shows the world the pictures, when it shows its own country the pictures, that's where you get your strength. That's where the Philippines is strong. So I just want to say, I could have come up here and talked about what Sea Light is doing. I'm proud of what the Philippines has done, and I am proud to have been invited here simply to enjoy the company of so many brave people. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Colonel Ray Powell. That was very, very insightful. Our next speaker will talk about countering hybrid warfare through joint maritime domain awareness. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the network coordinator of the Yokosuka Council for Asia Pacific Studies and a PhD student in geopolitics at the Paris Catholic University, Mr. Benjamin Blandin.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, I'm very honored to be here today, and I must actually thank very much Professor Manit, who was actually the first person in the Philippines to trust me. And when I was fresh off the plane in my first trip to the Philippines, and I knew no one in the country. So thank you, Professor Manit. Also, it's always nice to intervene after my good friend Ray Powell, who led the way for my research with this publication. And I would like today to talk to you a little bit about my research. So the topic of my research is analyzing the phenomena of asymmetric warfare in the South China Sea and the First Island Chain. So as part of that research, and I should actually correct a little bit the title. I'm not merely looking after hybrid warfare only, but about asymmetric warfare as a whole. And I need to precise a few notions about this before addressing maritime domain awareness. So asymmetric warfare or even mosaic warfare is a term that is there to coin or to actually represent the fact that in the South China Sea, we are not actually looking at separate events like hybrid warfare happening here, asymmetric hybrid area denial happening there, or invasion tactics at another place. What we are witnessing in the South China Sea is actually a combination. Those phenomena are not happening separately. They are happening together in a choreographed fashion, in a coordinated fashion. They are happening side by side. They are supporting each other, helping each other, and even in some cases, allowing each other. So these phenomena, I've been establishing a listing of these phenomena, and I've been able to list no less than 200 different phenomena that I was able to split in 12 different categories. So of course, we know the most visually graphic ones, of course. We know the ramming, we know the water cannoning, we know all of this. But in recent times, we had an ever-growing, not just number of phenomena, we had a growing regularity, diversity, intensity of these phenomena. Just the most recent ones, over just about 6 months, to give a few examples, we have had the use of water cannons, water cannons at full power, point blank range. We have had the use of helicopters and go fast as means of intimidation. We have had the firing of flares nearby a plane, and we have had, sorry, is it too loud? Oh, thank you. Yeah, so all those very graphic things we've seen on TV, but actually there is this sentence about China where it is glorious to win without a fight. And therefore, what you see on TV is actually a small fraction of this phenomena, a really small fraction, because China is shying away from nothing. They are manipulating national and international law. They are manipulating education. They are manipulating the media, administration, economy, and so on. So they are really having this full spectrum attack against the Philippines. And what can be done about this? Is it because China is most powerful? Is it because China has more boats, more planes, more missiles? The Philippines can do nothing? Well, actually, the opinion of more and more experts, whether faculty members, think tank experts, diplomats, or military, is no, there's something that can be done. And nobody pretends that transparentizing is the alpha and omega. Nobody is pretending that maritime domain awareness as a whole will single-handedly solve the situation. But something needs to be done. And if I needed to find some kind of image, if you want to build a house, start by the foundation. Maritime domain awareness is the foundation of a long-lasting deterrence against China. And of course, the countries of the region have all their different threats, different means, different strategic environments. They have different means. They not always have the same level of mastery technical, technological, industrial mastery. They all have their very unique situations. And the same way the Coast Guards in each countries are organized very differently. There's different level of threats and so on and so forth. But the point here is to find some kind of common ground because if I give just a few examples, when you look at Vietnam, the maritime militia is organized at the local level, Coast Guard and Fisheries at the regional level, the Navy at the national level. In Indonesia, you will have Bakamla and about 13 different agencies. And in the Philippines, there's again another organizations. So what needs to be done here is to find a common ground, common level of standards of data, some operational standards in order to cooperate together. And at the moment, there's things have started to be done. We saw in the Philippines is actually a very good example. You had the National Coast Watch Center has been established, the National Maritime Council, this new organization led by Secretary Centino. There's been the acquisition of weapon system like the BrahMos missiles. There's been this very impressive acquisition of equipment by the Coast Guard, the doubling of the staff. All of those things done by the Philippines is a living example that maritime domain awareness in itself is not the only key. Maritime domain awareness is one of the tools inside a much bigger toolbox, and it needs to work side by side. Again, in the case of the Philippines, I gave it a few examples, but Ray Powell talked about the fact of building resilience within the country. There needs to be the need to build communication material to diffuse the position of the government. There's so many things, even a national maritime museum. This is one of the, it may seem simple, but that was one of the examples that I gave to build the resilience in the nation. There's plenty of things that can be done that are non-lethal, that are constructive, that are split, that can be split later between different actors. And so, yeah, sorry. And so as a very brief conclusion, because actually I was a bit troubled because I'm going to be asked a question that is a little similar to my title. So that was the kind of conclusion that I wanted to reach. There's maritime domain awareness in itself is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's really one of many, many tools to be brought to the table in order to build long-lasting, distributed, and collaborative deterrence. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin Blandin. Also joining us today to talk about the reinvigorating defense cooperation as a strategy of deterrence is the former Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome retired General Emmanuel Bautista.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm sure all of you are now tired of listening to a series of speeches from a long list of speakers. So let me just keep this short. And thanks to the distinguished speakers earlier for saying everything. And so all we have to do is concord with what they have said. So allow me to just reiterate what have been said already and maybe add a few points. UNCLOS and the ruling handed down by the Permanent Court for Arbitration last July 12, 2016, has clearly defined our entitlements and rights in the West Philippine Seas. This has elevated our position to the high moral and legal ground. The more difficult task now, however, is to ensure that we can secure and benefit from what we are entitled to. We are all witness to how a rogue state has disregarded the rule of law and norms of international behavior to deprive us, now with even more violence, of what has been rightfully bequeathed to us by international law. We have to assert our sovereignty and sovereign rights, albeit responsibly, through a multifaceted approach. And some of these approaches have been discussed earlier by the previous speakers. Let me, however, delve into the topic assigned to me, reinvigorating defense cooperation as a strategy of deterrence. Ours is not to wage war, but simply to dissuade others from forcibly coercing us. And that can be achieved by fulfilling four requisites to credible deterrence. Namely, one, by maintaining our presence in the West Philippine Sea. Sustained presence, whether through government or civilian activities, serves as an enduring sentinel to secure our entitlements. Two, by enhancing our military capability, not necessarily to overwhelm, but enough to exact a steep price for aggression. Three, by strengthening and building alliances in order to demonstrate a broader front. And four, by demonstrating our resolve to push back. And this is the most essential requisite to credible deterrence. Defense cooperation, whether in the form of treaty alliance or other defense cooperation arrangements, helps us fulfill these requisites. The first, maintaining presence in the West Philippine Sea, can be reinforced further through joint patrols. Second, military capability of our armed forces can be upgraded with the help of our defense cooperation partners. Third, through more defense cooperation arrangements, we can further expand and strengthen our network of alliances and partnerships. And fourth, by partnering with others, we demonstrate our resolve to push back. In fact, the support we get from others inspires us further, as this also affirms the righteousness of our cause. In that respect, we thank our partners in Squad, the US, Japan, and Australia, as well as our other partners, UK, France, Canada, Sweden, EU, and many other countries who have expressed their support for us and continue to be with us. You saw them stand earlier in front of you. But having said that, we do not wish to be over-reliant on alliances and defense cooperations. Our nation's defense is our own responsibility. Alliances and defense cooperations are there only in support. We must bear in mind that at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to defend ourselves. Others will respect and help us only if we demonstrate our resolve to defend our sovereignty and sovereign rights. And we need to consistently demonstrate that resolve. So to my fellow Filipinos, we should never waver in defense of our country. We owe it to those who came before us. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to the future generations of Filipinos. And we enjoin the rest of the international community to be one with us in pursuit of a rules-based international order, in pursuit of peace, and the community of nations. Thank you, and mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, General Manny Bautista. Our next speaker will talk about working with friends, allies, and partners in pursuit of regional security. He is a trustee and program convener and non-resident fellow of the Stratbase ADR Institute and also a professor at the International Studies Department at the De La Salle University, Manila. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Renato De Castro.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I conduct my presentation, let me go back in time. The first time, of course, it was a celebration when, of course, the arbitral ruling was announced. At that time, of course, there were a lot of anticipations. For one thing, we don't know how China would react. We don't know how other countries would react, given the fact that at that time, this was, of course, in 2016, what comes to the mind of a lot of countries, even our treaty allies, the United States, our economic relation with China is very important. We could not afford to antagonize China because, as remember, Secretary Hillary Clinton said in 2010, how can you antagonize your neighbor if your partner, if your banker happened to be your banker and your important trader? And more importantly, more significant then, was how the Philippine government under the Duterte administration would react. So there was a lot of anticipation, and of course, eventually, it became apparent that the arbitral tribunal ruling would become an orphan, given the fact that the government itself that filed the case under the Duterte administration parroted Chinese position. The arbitral ruling is no good than a piece of trash paper coming from that former president. Fortunately, of course, right now, we have looking at the commemoration, the arbitral ruling is not anymore an orphan. It has a lot of supporters. So my topic for today is the fact that the arbitral ruling is very relevant, not only because the current administration has acknowledged the ruling, has basically made the ruling as a basis of what I call its grand strategy. It's the fact that we have friends, allies, and partners in pursuit not only of pursuing the arbitral ruling, the goals of the arbitral ruling, but of course using it as the basis for regional security. When I was given the task to talk about this topic is terribly broad. I could talk about the bilateral alliance, I could talk about AUKUS, I could talk about Quad. I decided to focus on the trilateral Japan, Philippines, U.S. security partnership because this is a basis of a chapter I wrote for a work. So let me start my presentation. I'll just try to raise, I have a couple of slides, but I'll do my best to make it short and simple. Please, first slide, please. Okay, of course, the Japan-Philippine-U.S. trilateral security partnership is one of a new arrangement that has been mentioned earlier, the lattice of work of cooperation which aim to nurture networks of what you call the traditional U.S. allies in the form of the hubs and spokes system. And of course, the fact that the reality we face is an expansionist China. Next slide, please. So it is a lattice work of cooperation made up of, the original allies when, of course, the Mutual Defense Treaty was signed. The U.S.-Japan Security Partnership was, of course, signed of U.S. allies, Japan, Australia, Philippines. And of course, the goal is strengthening their bilateral security cooperation to bolster defense capability collectively and, of course, independently. Next slide, please. So these four U.S. allies share a similar strategic vision of the fact that the quintessential security challenge to the region is, of course, Chinese expansion. But, of course, they have different interpretations. For some, of course, most would consider the South China Sea as the quintessential flashpoint. But, of course, the South China Sea issue, as important it is not the only flashpoint in the region. North of the Luzon, of course, is another major flashpoint. Of course, next slide, please. For instance, while all the policies of those four treaty allies are focused on Chinese behavior in the South China Sea, not all of them are focused in what I consider the other flashpoint, and that is, of course, just north of Luzon, just across the Luzon Strait, and that's no less, of course, than Taiwan, which China considers the core of its core interests, the unification with Taiwan, ending the century-long Chinese Civil War. Next slide, please. So the trilateral security partnership can be traced, of course, from President Marcos' initiative. So all the security partnership that are emerging are viewed respectively from the Philippine perspective. It's an action, no less than the Philippine government. Increasing the enhanced defense cooperation site, approaching other countries for this. This is an initiative of the Philippines because this is based on Philippine national interests. We're basically debunking the Chinese narrative that we are only doing it because we have allies or a treaty ally behind us. We have to assert our own independent agency. We're challenging China in the South China Sea because vital Philippine national interest is threatened, not because we have allies behind us. Next slide, please. So this was, of course, in the face of the three countries intensifying tension in the region and, of course, a growing anxiety that became very apparent after the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
that if Russia could do it to Ukraine, China would do it against Taiwan. And of course, the Philippines is the closest neighbor to Taiwan. We have 200,000 Filipinos working in Taiwan. Next slide, please. So President Marcos added, of course, this is important, in fact, that you have, changing situation in the region. Next slide, please. So the idea of a trilateral security partnership between Japan, the US, and the Philippines is not new because you have already been cooperation going on. First thing, of course, you have to look at it in terms of pillar. First pillar is the fact that you have the 1951 Philippine-US Mutual Defense Treaty, and of course, we have the Philippine-Japan Security Partnership, which of course was declared in June 2015 when the late President Benigno Aquino, of course, visited Japan and of course met the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Next slide, please. So just a breeze to the road of the Trilateral Summit before I focus on the summit itself and more importantly, the significance of this. So a month after this, of course, you have the Japanese Self-Defense Force joining the Philippine Army and the US Army in this military exercise. Next slide, please. Then, of course, primarily encourage Japan, specifically the Japanese Self-Defense Force, to go south. Of course, people are still talking about the pacifist Japanese 1947 Constitution and the fact that, of course, Japan is not supposed to have a military force. It just have a self-defense force. So we have to bring out Japan from its cocoon of pacifism. Of course, next slide, please. So, of course, you have the announcement, very important announcement, that Japan would soon be exporting defense hardware, initially with non-lethal, but of course, eventually lethal. And of course, the Philippines has been mentioned as one of the prospective recipients of those weapons. Next slide, please. Accordingly, Philippines is one of the most probable candidates to receive the security assistance. Next slide, please. So summer, of course, we have the meeting by the national security advisors of Japan, the Philippines, and of course, the United States, talking about the trilateral. Next slide, please. After a separate conversation, President Marcos, Vice President Kamala Harris, and President Marcos met on the side of the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta. Next slide, please. They collectively agreed to address Chinese effort, of course, to transform, change, effect, and expansion not only in the South China Sea, but in the in East China Sea, constituting what we call the waters within the first island chain. Next slide, please. So a few weeks later, the foreign ministers met on the side of the United Nations General Assembly and basically agreed. I just have to jump in. So let's look at the significance of this security partnership, this trilateral security partnership. Next slide, please. Okay, so next slide. So trilateral, Japan, so let's look at basically the implication. First one, the meeting, of course, that happened in Washington, D.C. after, of course, Prime Minister Kishida's speech to the United States Congress, held the first ever trilateral summit meeting, of course, in the face of what's happening in the region. Next slide. So 3 security partners committed themselves to cooperate exclusively in recently launched four-nation maritime cooperative activity, joint patrol, and of course, strengthening the capabilities of both the Philippine Coast Guard and of course, the Armed Forces of the Philippines at the time it's been announced that we are already adopting a comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Next slide, please. Efforts, of course, to help the Philippines secure the territorial waters and way into the exclusive economic zone, which is, of course, the goal of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Next slide, please. Joint vision basically talk in terms of what I call traditional geostrategic concerns, not only the South China Sea, and more significantly, as mentioned in the statement, Taiwan. Okay, next slide, please. Draw summit, developing, of course, what I could call the defense of the first island chain. You have, of course, I would call the southern cone, where you have, of course, the United States, Japan, and the Philippines. And, of course, in the northern cone, you have Japan, South Korea, and, of course, the United States, constituting a, what we call a diamond, basically. Next slide, please. But, of course, what is relevant to this security partnership is that it's not only focused on security, it's focused more significantly in economic security. Strengthening the Philippines' defense posture, comprehensive archipelagic concept will also be based on developing the Philippines' industrial capability. As President Marcos said, we cannot have geostrategic or military security if we don't have economic security. Next slide, please. So the Trilateral Summit raised a prospect of economic measures to finance construction of critical Philippine infrastructure, and more significantly, diverting our raw material exports from to China to the developing of our own industrial base, like, for example, nickel. Summit also highlighted the major infrastructure project as the Luzon Economic Corridor, which is, of course, projected design. Just one point here. The Trilateral Security Partnership is also a way to provide Japan the opportunity to play a more active role in security matters in two aspects. Number one, of course, we know for a fact that it's been a position of Japan to more or less transform the U.S.-Japan security partnership, because the U.S., of course, is obliged to support Japan. Japan is not required to do so because it's not a mutual defense treaty. So it has been a policy of Japan to provide assistance to the United States if push comes to shove in the South China Sea and probably more significantly in Taiwan. And of course, the other component there is economic. Japan is a close economic partner of the Philippines. Japan still has the 5th largest economy in the world, and Japan is here. It's also the task of Japan to assist the Philippines develop its comprehensive capabilities. Let's just go into the conclusion. So I basically have 3 issues regarding this. Number one, of course, is the fact that the joint vision is conspicuously silent on how the Trilateral Security Partnership would take its institutional shape. Probably this is a case of a work in progress. And the 2 others has something to do with the Philippines and ASEAN. I still remember this at the day when it was announced. I was in Singapore attending a conference, and you have a Singaporean public intellectual who openly criticized the formation of the Trilateral Security Partnership as provocative to China. Probably in a way, as a Filipino, I noticed that some of our ASEAN neighbors are not very comfortable with the fact that we're challenging China and we are aligning our policy more to, AUKUS, Quad, and of course, our treaty allies. Next slide, please. So there is, of course, a concern among some of our ASEAN neighbors that this trilateral security partnership could evolve to either an AUKUS-like strategic multilateralism or a Quad-like function, which, of course, would threaten ASEAN centrality. This is something, as Filipinos, we have to be aware of. We have to be sensitive with how our ASEAN neighbors are basically looking at our actions. Next slide, please. Last slide. Manila's close security partnership with Tokyo and Washington would also complicate what is sort of an ASEAN, a very ASEAN consensus, very subtle, of course, indicated by the ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. ASEAN would like to play a mediating role between the United States and China in its strategic competition. With the Philippines, of course, taking a very strong position, we are complicating ASEAN's general position. So this is also a challenge for us, the Philippines, to explain to our ASEAN neighbors that, when push comes to shove, we have to look at our national security. And what we're doing is also ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific would not serve only our interests, but also the interests of our fellow ASEAN member states. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rene De Castro. Our next speaker is another non-resident fellow at the Stratbase ADR Institute. He is also a professor of praxis at the Ateneo School of Government. Ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Dr. Admiral Romel Jude Ong.
Thank you, Joyce. Good afternoon, everybody. In the interest of time, I will proceed. Let me issue first 2 disclaimers and 1 caveat. First disclaimer is this is my own. Second disclaimer, I have no access to the Horizon list or the CADC. My caveat is I'm not in government, so I can speak in ways that the other panel before us cannot. The topic provided to me by Professor Dindo is this. Next slide, please. My threat board is looks this way. We are surrounded, okay? And
Each of these circles consists of potential flashpoints at any given day. Most of us are focused on the West Philippine Sea, but I say that we also need to look at what's happening in Bashi Channel and something that is happening in our east side, Solomon Islands, which may bite us sometime in the future. Next slide, please. My maritime defense posture would look like this: a whole of nation, whole of government archipelagic defense strategy for conflict scenario, an interagency maritime security strategy for crisis situations and during phase 0, homeland island defense strategy for phase 0, and a whole of government supply chain strategy for phase 0. And of course, an alliance and partnership management strategy, again, during phase 0. Next slide, please. If I were to put this in an operational design, it would look like this, with the lines of effort, the objective, the strategic center of gravity, operational center of gravity, and the end state. The end state, in a way, would be the basis for what we call the theory of victory. Theory of victory is for us to achieve or exercise our sovereignty, our sovereign rights, and insulate the Philippines from foreign interference. Next slide, please. If I were to put that into detail, the military capabilities required for 2024 onwards, it would look like this. Okay. For maritime defense, we need to focus on a joint defense of our sea lines of communication, and the Philippine archipelago has 7. One of them has been prominent the past few days, Balintang Channel, where one of the Chinese aircraft carrier passed by. We have 6 other archipelagic straits to defend. BrahMos, we need more of them. We needed it yesterday, and we will need that in the future. We need the Air Force to have an institutional buy-in in the ship-killing business. Okay, and that's a very difficult transition. Maritime strike is a totally different doctrine compared to air defense. We need drones to be able to address what we saw in Scarborough Shoal during the civilian convoy of May 15, where we had a minimum of 44 and a maximum of 49 mix of PLA, Chinese Coast Guard, and militia vessels all waiting and blockading Scarborough Shoal. They have the capability to swarm, and they can swarm in big numbers. For homeland defense, we need to transition the Philippine Army from COIN or counterinsurgency to community defense, repurposing it for community defense, and likewise developing a reservist structure for centers of resistance. We need to develop localized supply chain and refocus our energies to address CCP infiltration in our local government units, as manifested in the recent controversies of POGOs in the news. We need counterintelligence reform to address counter-political warfare requirements for foreign interference and counter-disinformation. Next slide, please. For air defense, we need to close the A2-AD gap. And second, we need to be able to defend our critical infrastructure. For cyber defense, I pose this question because the cyber capability has been something lingering in the armed forces for many years, but it has never been able to, seems to me, take shape or take traction. Maybe it's a structural issue. Perhaps we can look at maybe the better structure for that would be a D&D bureau, or maybe default the cyber capability, cyber defense business maybe to the Army, which has the manpower and the predisposition to address this problem. We need to also look at supply chain reform in terms of developing domestic industry and developing military-specific road networks, bridges, and rails. We have acquired tanks, but it seems they cannot pass through our bridges because of the weight. Okay? We need military-spec ports and harbors to be able to be for dual-use activities, and a military-private sector interface in terms of logistics. Next slide, please. Now, if I were to propose stopgap measures out of the box for some of the tactical issues we face today, this series of slides are just for your food of thought. For Ayungin Shoal, we need a replacement for BRP Sierra Madre at some form and in some time in the future. The platform before you is what we call a lift boat. It is self-propelled. You can just move it from point A to inside Ayungin Shoal. Of course, getting there is, I'm not saying gonna be easy as well. Just move the lift boat and the 3 legs will just raise itself. And you now have an instant platform. Next slide, please. The ship on the upper right is the Atlantic Conveyor. It was used by the British Navy during the Falklands War. Of course, it sunk. But the point is, it was a container ship repurposed to deploy Harrier jets for the Falklands War. There is an argument that maybe we need to go faster, but I say my argument is we need to go bigger. The ship on the lower left is used by the French Navy. There are 4 of them right now. They call it a naval support vessel. It can deploy aircraft, special operations teams, or drones at any given time. It's a civilian design, easily replicable. Next slide, please. For sea lanes, island, and shoal defense. By the way, I'm not a proponent of this. If you want to ask, I'll refer you to Benjamin. He knows the proponent. So I'm not selling them. Okay, but the point is there is already commercial off-the-shelf technology for deployable radar systems, a seaborne drone equipped with a cannon, water cannon, and something that can hit propellers. Okay, non-lethal. You need naval mines and, of course, unmanned surface vessels. Next slide, please. We need a drone factory. Okay, we do not need drones. We need a drone factory to create drones. And this is the ecosystem that we require for this drone factory that can be built here in the Philippines. Next slide, please. This is the schematic for a drone factory. This is not imagination. This is already a business proposal, actually. I'm waiting to it to be submitted in a few days. Next slide, please. Okay, for fishery patrol, I know this is something that will irritate you, but why not try a private contractor? Okay, for fishery patrol. It totally avoids the escalation or de-escalation issues that our government or state organizations are confronted with. It can be hired by our fisher folks on their own. Okay. And it can totally operate against maritime militia. The boat there is actually from the Sea Shepherd Squadron. Okay. If you want to ask. Next slide, please. I asked a friend to give me a list of all the hackers in the Philippines. So this is the list of all the Philippine hackers. Okay. To you, they are criminal groups. To me, this is my cyber army. Some of them are actually involved in financial scam. But I think everybody has this day of moving forward, maybe a change of life. Criminals can become decriminalized. So if this is a criminal organization, to me, that is my cyber army. Next slide, please. So in summary, we need to understand our battle space and how to dominate our archipelagic straits and decisive points. Our sea lines of communication, and I said there are 7 of them, is potentially the future areas of conflict. We need our agencies to break down the institutional stovepipes that prevent cooperation and synergy. We need to reform our current force structures to address emerging problems. And we need a robust military supply chain and domestic defense industry to support our military organization. Next slide. In the end, I give you these 4 principles: asymmetry of strategy, agility of the organization, adaptability in tactics, but more important, audacity in execution. I end and thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Romel Jude Ong. That was very interesting. Okay, so our final speaker for this panel is the editor-at-large of Rappler, Miss Marites Vitug. As I just mentioned earlier, she just recently published a book entitled Unrequited Love, Duterte's China Embrace. It tells the story of former President Rodrigo Duterte's pivot to China, the factors that influenced him, the results of the policy shift on the West Philippine Sea, and the rule of law, among others. So this book, as I mentioned also earlier, will be launched the next week, July 18. But in celebration of the 8th anniversary of the Arbitral Award, we're getting first dibs on her book. So the book is already available for purchase at the back if you want to get one for yourself before you leave later on. So to tell us more about her book and about addressing disinformation tactics in the West Philippine Sea, ladies and gentlemen, let us all welcome Miss Marites Vitug.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for advertising our book. And good afternoon to all the patient members of this audience. Again, just indulge me to continue with Joyce's advertisement. May I show you the book? So, as she said, it's outside. Ateneo is the publisher and they're selling it. And my co-author is here, Camille Elemia, and she will join us in the Q&A. So maybe briefly, Unrequited Love is a chronicle of a one-sided affair, a kind of love story that took place amid the backdrop of waves of Chinese intrusions in the West Philippine Sea. And it includes an entire chapter on disinformation, but broadly more on China's influence operations, covering various attempts to woo political parties, the media, as well as civil society. Now to my brief remarks. So today, the Philippines is experiencing an unprecedented level of disinformation from China. Never have we had such massive doses of disinformation from China. It's actually a tidal wave engulfing us, especially on the loudest narrative these days, that we will go to war with China if we continue standing up to the bully. The goal is to frighten us and weaken our opposition to China's aggressive behavior. The message is appease China or else. If you remember months ago, a deepfake audio of President Bongbong Marcos ordering an attack on China was uploaded on YouTube. It has since been removed. The DICT, or Department of Information, Communication and Technology, suspects a foreign actor to be behind this deepfake content. Even former Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong has been victimized by malicious actors. Last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, the Singapore Embassy here in Manila flagged the deepfake videos of Mr. Lee on their Facebook page. In a video, he supposedly said something along the lines that Marcos is not thinking and ended up getting his Navy troops in trouble with China. The deepfake video also shows Mr. Lee supposedly saying that the US is using the Philippines to provoke China. Surely we've heard this line several times from China. There's more peddling this war narrative. As for Marcos, the deepfake video was not the only fake content that preyed on him. On YouTube, a video claimed that he declared war on China. Rappler, among others, fact-checked this and found that the footage used in the misleading video was from the president's speech during the Day of Valor, or Araw ng Kagitingan, wherein he urged Filipinos not to yield to those who present clear and present threats to our sovereign rights. There was absolutely no declaration of war on China. Another YouTube video's title reads, I will only read the English translation, and each sentence is punctuated by an exclamation point. China was surprised. President BBM has signed an order declaring war. China's ambassador will be first. I don't know, first to do what? But according to Rappler's fact check, the video's narrator implies that Marcos's EO number 57, which General Centino amply explained earlier, signals aggression or even war. This is false. The EO aims to strengthen maritime security amid China's continued bullying in the West Philippine Sea. Last month, a misleading video claimed that China has threatened war on the Philippines. The video, which was uploaded after June 17, after the most violent encounter, exaggerated the Chinese Foreign Ministry's statement on the clashes between Chinese and Philippine vessels. There was absolutely no mention of war in the June 24 press conference of the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. So this narrative is similar to the line that former President Duterte used to tell us. We should talk to China, meaning appease them, or the only other option is we go to war. Till today, Duterte continues to spread this false choice. Recently, someone close to President Marcos, Senator Amy Marcos, posted her video on TikTok warning about China's plan to hit 25 targets in the Philippines using hypersonic missiles. It will not be a ground invasion by China, she said casually, but an air attack on targets, including her home province, Ilocos, and Subic. The US, she said, cannot stop these hypersonic missiles. All this, she said, is scary and disturbing. She had no facts to support her claims. Her scenario seems to have come out straight of Netflix. What this war narrative hides is the fact that there are a number of peaceful measures the Philippines has taken and is taking to protect our country's sovereign rights. And one of them, of course, is what we're commemorating today. Citizens groups, some of them are here, like Atenito, have shown their support for fishermen who by themselves are already exposing China's intimidation. We have the Transparency Initiative, we have forged a Coast Guard cooperation agreement with another claimant country, Vietnam, and dialogues continue through a bilateral mechanism. The recent one was held only last week. Sadly, there are Filipinos who echo China's narratives. Examples are the think tanks like IDSI, or the Integrated Development Studies Institute, and the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. Outside of think tanks, politicians, again like former President Duterte and Amy Marcos, lead the Beijing proxies. Some business persons with large conglomerates also echo pro-Beijing narratives. In fact, in Facebook, there has been a group, a pro-China network on Facebook, spreading propaganda and disinformation for years. This network of local proxies of Beijing, they get away by claiming academic expertise. But Rappler, in his fact-checking, found the good news is, as of 2023, this pro-China community had a small reach on Facebook. So what are we doing? At least in the media, we have Vera Files, we have Rappler doing robust fact-checking. Rappler has also a mentorship program on fact-checking and media literacy. Civil society, we have very active participants, but we still need the government to play a larger role. But I think, I'm sorry, General Centino, but maybe this is addressed to you, to the National Maritime Council. We need a strategic and data-driven policy to consistently fight and combat disinformation. We need to have digital investigation and network analysis. While we applaud our public officials who consistently and publicly debunk China's claims, we don't know the sources of this information. Have they been tracked down? Who are the sources? Where are these groups? What channels do they use? What local groups do these foreign actors work with? So we hope that the NMC can spearhead this effort. And in the case of the deepfake audio victimizing no less than the President of the Philippines, 5 government agencies have been looking into who's behind it. It's been months until today. We do not know if any of these bodies has found anything conclusive. General Bronner recently warned the public of disinformation from China targeting various sectors of Philippine society. So we look forward I think you're the favorite subject now, General Centin. We look forward to a more unified approach to combat disinformation based on evidence and data. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ms. Marites Vitug. So at this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion. So may we call back on stage our speakers, Colonel Ray Powell, Mr. Benjamin Blandin, General Manny Bautista, Dr. Renato de Castro, Admiral Rommel Ong, and we would also like to invite on stage Ms. Camille Elemia, the co-author of Ms. Marites Vitug. And to moderate our discussion, may we call on Dr. Marie Thaymar Tana, Associate Professor at the Department of Political Science at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Let us all welcome Dr. Marie Thaymar Tana.
So good afternoon, everyone, and also thank you to our panelists for the insightful remarks. So we will now delve into more specific aspects of this issue. But before I open the floor to questions from our audience, I have a few questions to begin the discussion. Okay, so for Colonel Powell first. Okay, so what patterns in the Chinese vessel deployments in the West Philippine Sea have you observed through satellite imaging, and what do these patterns reveal about China's strategies?
Well, so beginning last year, around the summertime when we were here, we saw a surge of Chinese vessels go into the West Philippine Sea, especially around Pagasa, Mischief Reef, and then some of the vessel swarms we saw, also of course Scarborough Shoal, and that increased throughout the later part of the summer into the fall, and saw all of those very exciting pictures that we saw coming back from a lot of those resupply missions, and also the missions up to the fishermen support missions up to Scarborough Shoal. Recently, in fact, just in the last 24 hours or so, for whatever reason, a number of the maritime militia ships left Ayungin Shoal and went back to Mischief Reef, as did some of the ones at Sabina Shoal. So that's interesting to me. I'm watching that currently. I don't know if that is indicative of anything going forward, or maybe they're just taking a break. But that's I suppose the other thing is that we would note that there has been this increase of activity at Sabina Shoal. Of course, some of that has to do with the Teresa Magbanwa going out there in April, and so now it has picked up a friend, a very, very large friend, of 165 meters long, the monster ship, which is now one of the latest in the Coast Guard ships that is watching the Teresa Magbanwa.
Okay, thank you. That's interesting. For Benjamin, next. So what are the obstacles and difficulties ahead in adopting joint maritime domain awareness?
Well, actually, there's the limitation that I mentioned before in terms of, first of all, the capacities of the different countries that want to interact in this joint maritime domain awareness, because it can be at the bilateral level, trilateral level, regional level, and the more countries you bring, the more difficulties you may bring too. Second of all, there's a difference in terms of ambition. What kind of ambition do you have behind this joint maritime domain awareness? Do we limit ourselves to like satellite imagery, to satellite aperture radar, or AIS? Because there's plenty of technologies. You can detect the light bulbs, you can detect the weather radars, the fishing radars, you can detect even the magnetic resonance of the hull if you want to. So what is the technical and technological level that you think collectively the actors can reach? And finally, there's also different kind of maritime domain awareness solutions. Is it going to be homegrown solution? Is it going to be a private solution? Is it going to be a solution like IPMDA from the US? Is it going to be Share-it and Crimario from Europe? There's really plenty of different elements to take into consideration in terms of blocking points.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you for that response. So I would like to direct the next question to General Bautista. So, Sir Manny, how can other countries best support the implementation of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept and the Philippines' efforts to enhance its external defense?
The very least we ask the international community is to simply speak out against the use of coercion and aggression against not necessarily the Philippines, but anybody. That's the very least that we can ask for. Now, we have different levels of defense cooperations from alliances to strategic partnerships and others. So it depends on that level of relationship with these countries on what support we can expect from them or how they can help us. So, but I mentioned earlier that in terms of deterrence, I mentioned four requisites to credible deterrence, and these are the areas where selectively the different countries, depending on the level of relationship with us, can help us. Presence, first one, presence. There are countries helping us with this, joint patrols, for instance. The upgrade of our military capability is one area. And also, by simply aligning with us or cooperating with us or strategic partnership, that already is a big help to us because it broadens our network of partnerships and it presents a broader front for us. And as I said, the minimum is we only ask that they support the rules-based international order to speak against the use of force and coercion against anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And for my professor, Professor Renato de Castro, so in recent years, sir, we have witnessed strengthened defense partnerships with like-minded partners as demonstrated by the signing of agreements and increased joint activities. So how can the Philippines ensure that its defense cooperation efforts are sustained and maximized?
First of all, of course, we have to maintain what they call continuity in terms of policy. Of course, if you have to look at the Philippines, looking at Philippine policy since, of course, 2000, the time of the late President Benigno Aquino III, and then going to the 6 years of the appeasement policy of former President Rodrigo Duterte, then, of course, looking at what's happening right now, it seems to be there's disconnect. And there's always a saying that every time we have a change in president, you have basically a change in policy, which is, I think, kind of myopic. In reality, in my most recent peer review article, I actually said there's actually a continuity in policy. That, the policy has been to challenge China even during the Duterte administration, because the Duterte administration adopted a policy of appeasement, but 2 years on, just before the term, it basically realized appeasing China simply doesn't work. Whether you appease China or you challenge China, you get the same treatment, subjugation and conquest. So in fact, in a way, despite the fact there seemed to be disconnect in terms of policy, there's continuity, a realization, especially culminating at this point in time, that we simply have no choice but, of course, confront China head on and basically say it is a case of maritime expansion not only in the South China Sea, but West Philippine Sea. And we have to basically adopt a policy based on what I call grand stretching. In fact, we have it in the form of the comprehensive archipelagic defense concept. Probably next administration, we don't know who. Hopefully, it will not be somebody who just resigned from a position. I will not mention the name. Later on, after 1 or 2 years of realizing it's always a folly to appease China, then of course later on we'll have continuity. And that's basically what would basically ensure that we'll get support from our treaty ally, from our security partners, and of course countries that abide by what we call the rules-based international order.
Okay, so thank you very much, sir. So yes, let's stay optimistic about the future. And next, Admiral Ong. So, Sir Jude, how would you assess the current state of the AFP modernization program? And what suggestions would you propose to enhance its modernization efforts for achieving a robust maritime defense capability?
Number one, I should not be commenting on the modernization because I think it's already completed. They are already, the Rehorizon list has been approved and it's for implementation. And I think we need to support the armed forces in terms of actually execution of that list or that program. Now, maybe later on, what we can look at is actually some of the peripheral requirements to support the modernization. As I said earlier, you need to address supply chain issues. When I say supply chain is, the best analogy I can have is if you buy a printer, okay, you have to consider also the cartridge of the ink, not only the printer. At some point, there are actually times that the ink is more expensive than the printer. Okay, so this is supply chain issues that we need to resolve. And when you buy an equipment, you need to look at life cycle cost and how long down the road that is going to be useful. At the end of the day, you need logisticians, military logisticians as part of the process of discerning what will work and what will not work. Okay, it cannot be all equipment-based planning. Yun lang.
Okay, so thank you. And last but not least, for Ms. Marites and Ms. Camille, so drawing on your new book, how has Chinese propaganda evolved in the Philippines and what strategies have been most effective in shaping public opinion?
Well, as we earlier discussed, China hasn't really been effective in terms of influencing the people. We have somehow inherent shield, so to speak. So number one, there's an inherent distrust of China, which at the extreme could lead to racism. But moving forward, there's that inherent distrust. We have, at least for the Philippine media, we have a culture of watchdog journalism. And also, the issue of the West Philippine Sea is somehow a gut issue so that even ordinary Filipinos can relate to it. So somehow that's our edge. But as we've seen over the past years, China is in this for the long haul. And we've seen how they've invested in fake sites. I'm saying fake sites because these appear to be like, for example, we discussed this in the book. We found a website that's trying to imitate Inquirer.net. So they call it Sovereign PH. And we've traced the network and it has been producing actual news, but we all know like we can trace the owner and all that. So that's one thing. And as we've also seen during the Duterte administration, it's really dangerous if there's already a network of these pro-Chinese spewing pro-China narratives and disinformation, and then the government of the day is actually helping them. As we've seen, these IDSI analysts have been, now they're being called out. But in the past years, during the Duterte administration, they were legitimized. They were airing on state media, all forms, PTV, the radio, and even on the websites of the Philippine government. So that's really scary. But more than that, it's also, that's on the public level. But there's also, as we've talked to politicians and even ordinary citizens, they've been seeing a rise in more, they're more outright in terms of influencing these politicians and policymakers. And now, of course, because as we all know, politicians seem to follow what the government of the day is doing or taking the lead in. But yeah, so we have to really be careful of that. But the good thing now is before the Duterte during the Duterte administration, we all know the names, at least for the certain journalists following the disinformation topics, we know these names. I can say it because I already wrote about them. So Herman Q. Laurel and all these IDSI people. But now, so you can see they've been thriving, but now it's only now that they're called out. So I think that's the edge. So who knows, maybe in the next administration, if it will be a pro-China administration, at least the public already knows that this system or this propaganda exists.
Okay, Okay, so thank you everyone for your thorough and thought-provoking responses. So we can now open the floor to questions from the audience. So please raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. Kindly state your name and affiliation before asking your question. And if possible, please keep the questions short and direct. Okay, so perhaps we could have two questions to start. Um, yes, sir. And then
Ken Benedicto, PCFR. Recently, one of the highest officials of government was asked if she would be attending the SONA, and she said no. And she said that she is the designated survivor. What is your take on this?
Okay, so is the question directed specifically for anyone, sir, or
Anybody who
anyone?
would like
Okay.
to answer.
So anyone would like to? Oh, maybe we could take one more question, sir. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Friso Dubbelboer. I'm from the Leiden Asia Center in the Netherlands. I've been hearing a lot of talks about POGOs, illegal gambling organizations in the Philippines the last few years. And what I understand is in many cases there are Chinese nationals behind it. And my question would be in which measure it is considered a national security problem, or is it just a sheer criminal offense? I think that the question would be for Ms. Pituk and Ms. Elemia.
Yes.
I really haven't looked into POGOs, but I know that Admiral Ong, who can speak freely because he's not with government.
Thanks.
My current study now is on foreign interference, but unfortunately, I have not delved into CCP link with criminal groups, so that was not part of my study. But I've read some references, and maybe you can look at it, about CCP engagement using criminal groups in the Solomon Islands. And I think CCP or MSS interaction with criminal groups in Italy. So I'm not the first source of that, so maybe you can look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What about the first question? What are your comments about the Vice President's remarks? No comment? Okay. So they will add something about the POGO.
What makes it tricky to actually report, at least for the media side on POGO, is that the Chinese government is outrightly denying or they don't agree with POGO, and they're even insisting that the Philippines should block it. But then, based on our fieldwork for our book, we already encountered, especially in Davao, there have been lots of mainland Chinese, or they already call them as migrant Chinese who've lived in the Davao for the past years. And initially they engage in they serve as brokers. So how they do that is that they ask other mainlanders from China, oh, if you want to go work in the Philippines, I'll be your agent. And then these people have also expanded to other questionable businesses. Like, for example, this is on record, Arturo Las Cañas, the former Davao Death Squad member of Duterte, said that Michael Yang, which is also one of those linked to POGOs, is actually also linked to drugs, according to him. So it's hard to directly connect it to the Chinese government because of that gray zone.
Okay. Next question. Sorry about the designated survivor. It's a good TV series though. Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm Ed Adan from the Council for Foreign Relations. My question is addressed to Ms. Bitug. One of the conditions to ease the transformation of the AFP to external defense mode is for the PNP to take over the internal security operations. What challenges can we see ahead with this requirement? The
Sir,
PNP taking over ISO, Philippine National Police. What are the challenges?
sir, is that for me?
Yes?
I may be the wrong person. I think General, the former chief of staff here.
Oh, well, to anybody. Okay.
It's not just handing it over to the PNP. There are, in fact, several options if we are going to transition the armed forces to territorial defense, which in fact is their primary mandate, their constitutional mandate. PNP is one of them, one of the options. The other option is to reconstitute a constabulary type force, as we did in the past, where the constabulary type, we need not call it constabulary. Many countries have a similar organization with different names to address internal security. That's another option. Another option is the concept of homeland defense, where you organize. So there are many options possible. We need not focus on handing it over to the PNP because there is a law governing the PNP, the creation of the PNP. If it were indeed handed over to the PNP, perhaps we need a two-tiered PNP, one addressing law enforcement at the local level and one addressing internal security issues. So there are several options, in fact, to address that issue.
Okay, thank you, sir. So in the interest of time, perhaps we could have one final question.
Yeah. General Bautista and Admiral Ong. Earlier, the Navy and the Coast Guard was saying that they have strengthened protection in the disputed areas, specifically the Reed Bank. Do you think that we have amply protected the area, the Reed Bank, for example, where we have not been able to explore the resources until now, despite the fact that we are in dire need of an alternative source of supply because Malampaya is losing the resources there? Can we now recommend the lifting of the moratorium in the area because we now have the capability to protect our resources in Reed Bank?
Admiral Ong and General Bautista.
I guess that is best answered by General Centino officially. But Admiral Ong, because he's not in government, can be in a position.
Okay, let me answer that question strategically. Okay. Even if we have Reed Bank up and running, there's always the potential that the Chinese will blockade. Okay. Let's say it's up and running already. There's also potential of blockading it. So I think although medyo long-term, the long-term solution is actually transitioning to civil nuclear. Okay. But that will be the long-term. The midterm would be looking at other renewable sources of energy. Okay. Unfortunately, if you asked that question maybe 2-3 years ago, I would say we need to fight for Reed Bank. Okay. But given the recent experiences we've seen in terms of the capacity of our neighbor to surge forces at any given time and swarm, that will be a very difficult undertaking, I think. So I think the strategic move would be, I think, what government is doing now. Look at civil nuclear energy as the long-term solution. Look at other renewable energies as nakatayo sa lupa, hindi nasa dagat.
But
Okay?
sir, Vietnam and Malaysia have gone ahead, right, to do their thing despite China's protests. And there are suggestions that we do the same, right? So why not? And considering that we have strengthened, as the Navy and the Coast Guard are saying, nuclear energy is a long way off. Renewable energy is going to take years, right? But we have those resources. Those reed bank is definitely not disputed. It's part of our EEZ. Why not?
I think it's an issue of capacity. As much as we have, let's say, enough resources, it cannot be it cannot be concentrated on reed bank alone. We need to protect other areas in the Philippines. That's the pitfall of, because we are an archipelago. We have too many maritime vulnerabilities that we need to address. Okay? Kaya nga our long, again, sorry, we're looking at long term kasi yung short term talaga medyo alanganin. Kaya yung one of the long term solution is we need to look at industrial capacity. Okay? Kasi that would address the shortfall in number of hulls or number of ships that we can deploy at sea. Okay? With that shortfall, we can only concentrate. We can concentrate on reed bank, but we are going to be short in some other areas. Okay. So again, sorry, the solutions are all long term. So that we can be able to actually secure those areas, the entire archipelago. Thank you.
Colonel Powell.
Yeah, just very quickly. So I've had experience, served in Vietnam previously. Timing matters. Vietnam and Malaysia took advantage of an opportunity a decade ago and more in order to do their exploration and their exploitation. And that was not simple, but it is a much different matter now. China has expanded its force overmatch to the point where it would be a much, much more difficult proposition for the Philippines to start today. Now, you can look back many years and say, if only, but that's done now. So, I think I would really agree with Admiral Ong and say, right now, beginning that process of exploration all the way through exploitation and then maintaining that at the time when China has demonstrated a much greater capacity to be able to disrupt those operations, that's a very high-risk venture.
Okay, so thank you for those responses. So unfortunately, this is all the time that we have. So as we conclude this panel discussion, I want to express my sincere gratitude to our panelists for their valuable contributions and to our audience for their engagement and questions. So let us continue to support peaceful and lawful efforts in resolving this complex situation. And thank you, everyone, for being here.
Please stay on stage for a photo opportunity. Thank you very much again to our panelists for that very comprehensive discussion. So may we invite Professor Manhit again on stage for a photo opportunity with our panel. Thank you. Parating ka, sir. Thank you po. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I'll call you po. Yes, all right. Okay. So today has been a very informative and insightful day. So to wrap up the discussion and also to deliver Stratbase's official statement on the 8th Arbitral Award, or the 8th anniversary of the Arbitral Award, may we call back on stage Stratbase President Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit.
Thank you, everyone, for those who have stayed Thank you for those who have joined us, even online. Allow me to read our statement as an institute. 8 years ago, the Philippines' stance on the West Philippine Sea was reaffirmed by international law through the decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Our victory on July 12, 2016 marked a momentous occasion not just for the Philippines, but for the entire international community. Our victory showed that in the eyes of international law, all states are equal. The legally binding arbitral ruling is clear. The West Philippine Sea is ours. It is the responsibility of all parties to abide by and recognize their obligations under international law. Doing so ensures the enjoyment of freedoms and liberties made possible through the rule of law. The attainment of a secure, stable, peaceful, and prosperous region hinges upon this. Today, on the occasion of the 8th anniversary of the decision, we find ourselves continuing the fight to reassert our national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and economic rights in the West Philippine Sea. This year, we witness actions, most aggressive by far, performed against our fellow Filipinos at sea. Our troops, our fisher folks, and vessels encountered several attempts to block rotation and reprovision mission. Numerous occasions of firing of water cannons, an alarming number of collisions and near collisions. China's vicious attacks continue to escalate. Last month, we bore witness to a barbaric behavior that is in direct violation of international law. China not only blocked our vessels at Ayungin Seoul, but also seized our equipment and injured our people. As an act of piracy, armed with axes and knives, the Chinese Coast Guard reprimanded and threatened our soldiers for trespassing in their so-called territory. By these acts, China outperformed itself yet again. Our boats may be damaged, our lives may continuously be at risk, but our will to defend the West Philippine Sea has never been stronger. We saw that since this morning. We saw that daily as our military, our Coast Guard continues to stand firm. In the position and the direction of our government are firm. We will not yield. We will never yield. We will be steadfast. And we have the whole of Philippine society behind us as we assert our rights in the West Philippine Sea and the support of like-minded states in the community of nations. This gives us hope and confidence that we will be able to safeguard our national sovereignty, territorial integrity, and economic rights. Our collective efforts, whether big or small, have great impact on our collective pursuit of security and stability. Our institute utters this vow with fervor. We enjoin the whole of Philippine society to join us in this mission. We all have a stake in the West Philippine Sea. It is a waterway that serves as the lifeblood of our people. In it lies rich potential that is vital to trade, connectivity, livelihood, and economic development. As we commemorate our victory today, we invite our friends, allies, and partners who also value the rule of law to join us, to continue with us in our fight. Let us reinforce cooperation and elevate partnership by conducting joint patrols and military exercise. Let us likewise support the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines to protect our territory and maritime resources in the West Philippine Sea. The Filipino people stands firm on those things. We have seen that in the past 2 years of our national surveys. These measures, the Institute believes, send a strong message that the Philippines is not alone. Those who attempt to circumvent their obligations and behave aggressively will not be tolerated by the international community. We will not waver in our determination and commitment. Again, thank you for being with us. Thank you for all those who have stood firm with us since the case was filed in January 22, 2016, and since we won it 8 years ago, July 12, 2016. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
All right, and that ends our conference for today. Thank you very much once again to all our speakers and guests, and let us all give them a round of applause again, please. It has been a very interesting and informative conference. So, thank you once again for joining us. This has been Joyce Reyes. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.